Chapter 2. 2. The rays and the kingdoms in nature. Introductory remarks. 1. The mineral kingdom. 2. The vegetable kingdom. 3. The animal kingdom. Chapter 2. The rays and the kingdoms in nature. Introductory remarks. In starting upon a consideration of the relation of the rays to the seven kingdoms, I shall refer to the seven kingdoms on the upward or evolutionary arc, and not to the seven kingdoms as they can be enumerated on the involutionary or downward arc. This latter, according to the theosophical literature, includes three kingdoms, nebulous, relatively formless, and unexpressed, and the four kingdoms as enumerated by modern science. With the involutionary arc we have nothing to do. The understanding of it is well nigh impossible to the finite mind of the average reader. Though these three involutionary kingdoms exist, and though the little known about them in the West has received written form, any real comprehension of the implied truths is entirely lacking. This is quite unavoidable. Their comprehension lies hid in the capacity to recover the past and to see that past as a whole. The kingdoms which we shall consider in connection with the rays may be enumerated under the following terms. 1. The mineral kingdom. 7. 2. The vegetable kingdom. V. 3. The animal kingdom. V. 4. The kingdom of men. IV. 5. The kingdom of souls. 3. 6. The kingdom of planetary lives. 7. The kingdom of solar lives. I. These kingdoms might be regarded as differentiations of the one life, from the angle of 1. Phenomenal appearance, objective manifestation, or the externalization of the solar logos. 2. Consciousness or sensitivity to the expression of quality, through the medium of the phenomenal appearance. Certain of the rays, as might be expected, are more responsible than certain others for the qualifying of any particular kingdom. Their effect is paramount in its determination. The effect of the other rays is subsidiary, but not absent. We must never forget that, in the close interrelation of forces in our solar system, no one of the seven possible forces is without effect. All of them function, qualify and motivate, but one or other will have a more vital effect than the rest. The following tabulation will give the major effect of the seven rays and the result of their influence upon the seven kingdoms with which we are concerned. You will note one interesting difference in this tabulation, and that is the fact that the vegetable kingdom is the expression of three rays, whereas the others are expressions of two. Through these three, the vegetable kingdom has been brought to its present condition of supreme beauty and its developed symbolism of color. The vegetable kingdom is the outstanding contribution of our Earth to the general solar plan. Each of the planets contributes a unique and specialized quota to the sum total of evolutionary products, and the unique production of our particular planetary system is the vegetable kingdom. Other planets contribute forms and appearances which are their specific offering. It is needless for me to enumerate them here, for our language has no equivalent terms, and where there is no equivalent in language there is for mankind no equivalent in consciousness. The Earth, then, contributes the vegetable kingdom, and this is possible because it is the only kingdom in which three rays have finally succeeded in coalescing, infusing and blending. They are also the three rays along a major line of forces, 2, 4, 6. When we come to a more detailed analysis of the rays and their effects on a kingdom in nature, we shall see why this has produced so unique a contribution. Its success is demonstrated in the uniformity of its production of green in the realm of color, throughout the entire planet. You will note also that the mineral kingdom and the kingdom of solar lives, the first and seventh kingdoms, are the result of the activity of the first and the seventh rays. There is a close numerological interlocking here. These two kingdoms are respectively at the point of the greatest tenuity and the greatest density, and are produced by the will and the organizing ability of the solar deity. They embody the nebulous plan and the concretized plan. In the case of the seventh or highest kingdom, counting from below upwards, the will aspect predominates and is the most powerful, whilst in the case of the mineral kingdom, the organization aspect is of the most importance. This was to be anticipated, for the energy of will is the first effect of the initiating divine activity, whilst the densest aspect of ceremonial organization is the counterpart of the initial impulse, its concretization, if I might so express it. The other kingdoms in nature, as can be seen in our tabulation, are not so related. It will be of value if we now analyze our tabulation with a measure of care and get a little clearer grasp of the effect and influence of the seven rays. As long as the true nature of the atom and its internal organization remains a matter of investigation and of speculation and theory, the reader should regard what I here have to say in connection with this densest of all kingdoms as symbolically and pictorially true, but not to be taken literally. Just as the center at the base of the spine is the last one to be aroused into full functioning activity, and is thus aroused only when the head center is awakened and alive, so this lowest of all the kingdoms will be rightly understood only when all the seven kingdoms vibrate in unison. Until such time as this occurs, this kingdom and its life will remain an enigma, except to the initiate of high degree. All I can do is to make such suggestions as will arouse the abstract mind to activity and awaken interest to such a degree that the work of analysis and study will proceed. Conclusions cannot be reached, however, and this must be realized. Two rays are of prime importance in the life of God as it pours through this basic substance of our planet. In the work of the seventh ray, we have earthy substance, the solid material of our planetary life, organized into the varying mineral forms. These mineral forms, in their turn, hold latent those sustaining and vitalizing elements from which other forms draw their sustenance. It must be remembered that each kingdom in nature is dependent upon and draws life from the kingdom which precedes it in the time sense, during the evolutionary cycle. Each kingdom is a reservoir of power and of vitality to the next kingdom which emerges under the divine plan. The vegetable kingdom, for instance, draws its vital strength from three sources: the sun, the water and the earth. In the building process it is the mineral content from the two latter sources that is of prime importance. The true structure of all forms is produced by the fabric of mineral products which is gradually built upon the etheric body, and which takes shape and form under a vital etheric urge, desire or impulse. It is the magnetic quality of the etheric body which attracts to itself the minerals needed for this skeleton form. The animal kingdom, in turn, draws its sustenance primarily from the sun, the water and the vegetable kingdom. The mineral content required for the skeleton structure is therefore offered in a more advanced and sublimated form, being gathered out of the offering of the vegetable kingdom instead of out of that of the mineral kingdom. Each kingdom offers sacrifice to the next succeeding kingdom in the evolutionary sequence. The law of sacrifice determines the nature of each kingdom. Therefore each kingdom may be regarded as a laboratory wherein are prepared those forms of nutriment which are needed for the building of ever more refined structures. The human kingdom follows the same procedure, and draws its life, from the form angle, out of the animal kingdom as well as from the sun, water and the vegetable world. In the early stages of human unfoldment, animal food was, therefore, both karmically and in essence, the correct food for man, and for unevolved men, and from the standpoint of the animal form, such food is still right and proper. This brings up the whole question of vegetarianism, and I shall deal with it when we come to consider the fourth kingdom. The situation is not at all what is often thought, or as presented by the thinkers of today, and meat-eating, at a certain stage of human unfoldment, incurs no evil doing. Out of the great experimental school of human existence the kingdom of souls draws sustenance and vitality, and in the interlocking and interrelation of these four divine organisms does the world of form live and move and have its being. There are certain parallels in the human organism and certain correspondences which are of interest, and they may be presented in the following manner. The human kingdom. Brain. The two head centers. Vocal organs. The animal kingdom. Stomach. The solar plexus. Liver. The vegetable kingdom. Heart. The heart center. Lungs. The throat center. The mineral kingdom. Generative organs. The sacral center. The base of spine. The relation of the seven centers to the various kingdoms in nature can be here seen, and the symbolism of the human form can be noted. The seven kingdoms as a whole can also be seen as having the following relations. 1. Mineral kingdom. Base of spine. Adrenals. 2. Vegetable kingdom. Heart center. Thymus. 3. Animal kingdom. Solar plexus. Pancreas. 4. Human kingdom. Sacral center. Gonads. 5. Egoic kingdom. Throat center. Thyroid. 6. Planetary kingdom. Ajna center. Pituitary. 7. Solar kingdom. Head center. Pineal. A study of these correspondences will be of value if the student will remember that these are the correspondences studied at the first initiation. They differ at the later expansions of consciousness. The influence of the organizing seventh ray is best seen in the amazing and geometrically perfect structure of the elements, as revealed by the microscope and by a study of the atom. As this treatise is intended for the reader who has no academic or scientific training, it will suffice to say that the mineral kingdom is a result of the ritual of rhythm, as are all the basic forms upon which the myriad of structures in manifestation are constructed and founded. The system of numbers demonstrates in its fullest beauty in this kingdom, and there is no form and no numerological relation which cannot be discovered in minute form in this foundational kingdom, under the occult microscopic vision. Two factors determine the structures found in the mineral kingdom. 1. The seventh great impulse, or the will to organize. 2. The urge to create, or the initial rhythm which led the solar logos to take form. The work of the seventh lord and of the first lord is essentially the work of the architect and of the magician, and their efforts are seen to perfection in the mineral world. This will not, however, be realized in full potency and magical revelation until the inner eye of true vision is developed and the forms underlying the creative work in the other kingdoms in nature are seen in their real values. The secrets of transmutation are the true secrets of this particular kingdom, and the two words expressing the process and the secret are condensation and transmutation. Each kingdom has its key words, which can be translated, though most inadequately, as follows. Kingdom process secret objective. 1. Mineral. Condensation. Transmutation. Radiation. 2. Vegetable. Conformation. Transformation. Magnetization. 3. Animal. Concretization. Transfusion. Experimentation. 4. Human. Adaptation. Translation. Transfiguration. 5. Egoic. Externalization. Manifestation. Realization. A general picture of the creative intent emerges as one considers the significance of these words. The objectives and processes of the two highest kingdoms are too advanced for the average student to grasp, and constitute likewise two of the secrets of the higher initiation. As this treatise is intended to be a practical attempt to elucidate the new psychology, and as its objective is to increase man's understanding of himself, it is not my intention to do more than convey a few ideas anent the rays and their relation to the three subhuman kingdoms in nature. In all esoteric writings it is necessary to show the synthesis and the continuity of the whole process of evolution, for only as man appreciates his position, midway between the higher three kingdoms and the lower three, will the true significance of the contribution of the fourth kingdom to the entire scheme of evolution appear. I have given several tabulations of correspondences and of the ray influences, and these warrant careful study. It is, for instance, apparent that if the seventh ray is now coming into power, and if its effect upon the lower kingdoms is beginning to be felt, then humanity must be prepared for such changes as are inevitable. Left alone and unaided, man would eventually discover for himself the designated events, but it would take much time and only in retrospect would the broad general outlines of the evolutionary process emerge from the mass of detail in which they are lost in the immediate present and foreground. By a willingness to study the truths that are sent out, from time to time, from the occult centers of the world, and through a readiness to act on suggested hypothesis will man increase his capacity to see life whole, and be able therefore to cooperate, with power and intelligence, in the working out of the plan. I dealt above with the process, the secret and the purpose. For right understanding I shall now give you a synopsis of the information, concerning each kingdom, as it comes under consideration. 1. The mineral kingdom. Influence. The seventh ray of organization and the first ray of power are the dominant factors. Results. The evolutionary results are radiation and potency, a static potency, underlying the rest of the natural scheme. Process. Condensation. Secret. Transmutation. The treatise on cosmic fire defines this as follows: transmutation is the passage from one state of being to another through the agency of fire. Purpose. To demonstrate the radioactivity of life. Divisions. Base metals, standard metals, precious stones. Objective agency. Fire. Fire is the initiating factor in this kingdom. Subjective agency. Sound. Quality. Extreme density. Inertia. Brilliance. Students must remember that we are not dealing with the elements and atoms, as we study this kingdom. They are the substance out of which all the mineral forms are made. But we are dealing with the mineral forms as they manifest in the concrete world. We are considering the tangible and objective world. The internal constitution and geometrical formation of the minerals do not come under our subject matter. This is not a scientific treatise, as usually understood, but a study in quality and consciousness as they affect the form aspect. Much, if not nearly all that exoteric science has posited regarding the mineral kingdom can, for ordinary uses, be accepted as relative fact. But 2 points should be considered, and they are: 1. The consciousness aspect of the mineral world. 2. The transmutation of forms by fire in that kingdom, leading to an ultimate radiation. The best known example of the effect of the initiation of the mineral by fire can be seen in the great transition and transformation, allotropically brought about, from the carbon stage to that of the perfect diamond. A further qualitative stage can be seen as the radiation or the throwing off of rays, as in radium. That there are 3 stages in the evolutionary processes in the mineral kingdom must be borne in mind, and these, though apparently unrelated to each other from the angle of modern science, are nevertheless subjectively and essentially part of a tremendous inner process. These stages are the correspondences in the mineral kingdom to the stages of animal consciousness, of self-consciousness, and of the radiant group consciousness of the soul. There is a 4th stage of potency or of organized expressed power, but this lies ahead, and is the analogy in this kingdom to the life of the monad, as expressed in the solar consciousness of the initiates of high degree. Just as science has discovered the 92 elements so that the list of the possible elements is relatively complete, so eventually science will have arranged the progressive tables which will show the 3 stages of the life cycle of every mineral leading from the static mineral stage, such as carbon, through that of the crystal, semi-precious stone and precious stone to that of the radioactive substance. In the determining of this development it is impossible for man as yet to see the relations, for the cycles covered are so vast, the action of the fire in these tremendous periods so varying, and the recognition of the intermediate stages so difficult, that aught that I could say would but feed amusement and incredulity. But 2 basic premises can be laid down. 1. That the many mineral substances fall naturally into 7 main groups, corresponding to the 7 subdivisions of the influencing rays, those of organization and power. 2. That only in those world cycles when the 7th ray is in manifestation, and therefore supremely powerful, do certain hidden changes take place in these 7 groups. These are the correspondences, in the mineral evolution, to the 7 initiations of man. At these times there is an increased radiatory activity. This can be noted at this time in the discovery of radioactive substance, as the incoming ray increases its potency, decade by decade. A certain amount of radiation is basic and fundamental in any world cycle. But when the seventh ray comes in, there is an intensification of that radiation, and new substances appear to come into new activity. This intensification leaves the entire mineral kingdom, as a whole, more radioactive than before, until this increased radiation becomes in its turn basic and fundamental. As the seventh ray passes cyclically out of manifestation, a certain measure of inertia settles down on the kingdom, though that which is radiatory continues its activity. In this way, the radiation of the mineral world steadily increases as the cycles come and go, and there is necessarily a paralleling effect upon the higher three kingdoms. People today have no idea what effect this radiation, due to the incoming ray, will have, not only upon the surrounding mineral world but on the vegetable kingdom, which has its roots in the mineral kingdom, and upon men and animals in lesser degree. The power of the incoming cosmic rays has called forth the more easily recognized radioactivity with which modern science is now concerned. It was 3 seventh-ray disciples who interpreted these rays to man. I refer to the Curies and to Millikan. Being themselves on the seventh ray, they had the necessary psychic equipment and responsiveness to enable them intuitively to recognize their own ray vibration in the mineral kingdom. The seventh ray is one of organized ritual, and in form building this quality is basic and necessary. The processes found in the mineral kingdom are profoundly geometrical. The first ray is that of dynamic will or power, and, speaking symbolically, when perfected forms and organized vehicles and dynamic power are related and unified, then we shall have a full expression, at the point of deepest and densest concretion, of the mind of God in form, with a radiation which will be dynamically effective. Again, speaking symbolically, and what else is possible when dealing with a mechanism as yet so inadequate as the mind and brain of the average aspirant? The mineral kingdom marks the point of unique condensation. This is produced under the action of fire and by the pressure of the divine idea. Esoterically speaking, we have, in the mineral world, the divine plan hidden in the geometry of a crystal, and God's radiant beauty stored in the color of a precious stone. In miniature and at the lowest point of manifestation, we find the divine concepts working out. The goal of the universal concept is seen when the jewel rays forth its beauty, and when radium sends forth its rays, both destructive and constructive. If you could really understand the history of a crystal, you would enter into the glory of God. If you could enter into the attractive and the repulsive consciousness of a piece of iron or lead, you would see revealed the complete story of evolution. If you could study the hidden processes which go on under the influence of fire, you would enter into the secret of initiation. When the day comes when the history of the mineral kingdom can be grasped by the illumined seer, he will then see the long road that the diamond has traveled, and, by analogy, the long road that all sons of God traverse, governed by the same laws and unfolding the same consciousness. The seventh ray, when manifesting on the seventh plane, as is now the case, is peculiarly potent, and its effect upon the mineral kingdom is consequently dynamically felt. If it is true that there is only one substance and one spirit, that matter is spirit at the lowest point of its cyclic activity, and spirit is matter at its highest, then the ray of ceremonial order or ritual is but an expression of its polar opposite, the first ray of will or power. It is the expression of the same potency under another aspect. This means therefore that 1. The power or will of God expresses itself through the organized systematized processes of the seventh ray. The geometrical faculty of the universal mind finds its most material perfection on the physical or seventh plane, working through the seventh ray. So the mineral kingdom came into being as this major expression. It holds in solution all the forces and those chemicals and minerals which are needed by the forms in the other material kingdoms. 2. The mineral kingdom is therefore the most concrete expression of the dual unity of power and order. It constitutes the foundation of the ordered physical structure or the universe of our planet. 3. The rhythmic ritualistic adaptability of the seventh ray, plus the dynamic will of the power ray, are needed in conjunction for the full working out of the plan, as it is found in the mind of God. This is why, in this present period of transition, the Lord of the seventh ray is taking over the control of affairs and the ordered working out of the plan, so as eventually to restore stability to the planet and give the incoming Aquarian influences a stable and extended field in which to work. This we shall later elaborate when we take up the study of the zodiacal signs and their relation to the rays. We shall now touch upon the next 2 points, condensation and its hidden secret, transmutation. From the standpoint of external matter, the mineral kingdom marks the densest expression of the life of God in substance, and its outstanding, though oft unrealized, characteristic is imprisoned or unexpressed power. Speaking in symbols, a volcano in eruption is a mild expression of this power. From the standpoint of esoteric substance, the 4 ethers are far more dense and substantial. This modern science has also told us, positing the hypothetical ether. This 5th kingdom, counting occultly from the egoic kingdom downwards, is a reflection of these 4 ethers, and the point of their densest concretion. Just as they substand, or form the basis of the manifested world, and are regarded as the true form, so the mineral kingdom is the fundamental kingdom in the 3 worlds, under the law of correspondences. It is, in a most peculiar sense, precipitated etheric substance, and is a condensation or externalization of the etheric planes. This solidification or precipitation, resulting in the production of dense objective or solid matter, is the tangible result of the interplay of the energies and qualities of the 1st and 7th rays. Their united will and ordered rhythm have produced this Earth and the molten content of the planet, regarding the Earth as the crust. In the turning of the Great Wheel, cycle after cycle, these 2 rays come into functioning activity, and in between their objective cycles the other rays dominate and participate in the great work. The result of this interplay of psychic potencies will manifest in the eventual transmutation of the earth substance, and its resolution back again into that of which it is the objective condensation. Again language fails to find the needed terms. They are as yet non-existent. I mention this as an indication of the difficulty of our subject. Intangible etheric substance has been condensed into the dense tangible objective world. This, under the evolutionary plan, has to be again transmuted into its original condition, plus the gain of ordered rhythm and the tendencies and qualities wrought into the consciousness of its atoms and elements through the experience of externalization. This resolution is noted by us as radiation and the radioactive substances. We are looking on at the transmutation process. The resolving agencies are fire, intense heat and pressure. These 3 agencies have already succeeded in bringing about the divisions of the mineral kingdom into 3 parts. The baser metals, as they are called, the standard metals, such as silver and gold and platinum, and the semi-precious stones and crystals. The precious jewels are a synthesis of all 3, one of the basic syntheses of evolution. In this connection, some correspondences between the mineral kingdom and the human evolutionary cycles might here be noted. 1. The base metals. Physical plane. Dense consciousness. The first initiation. 2. The standard metals. Astral plane. Self-consciousness. The second initiation. 3. The semi-precious stones. Mental plane. Radiant consciousness. The third initiation. 4. The precious jewels. Egoic consciousness and achievement. The fourth initiation. The correspondences of fire, heat and pressure in the evolution of the human being are self-evident, and their work can be seen paralleling that in the mineral kingdom. The mineral kingdom is governed astrologically by Taurus, and there is a symbolic relation between the eye, in the head of the bull, the third eye, the light in the head, and the diamond. The consciousness of the Buddha has been called the diamond eye. We have been technical, and much has been given which seems to have no bearing upon the psychological development of man. But to understand the rays and their bearing on life as a whole, it is necessary that man should grasp the fact that he is only a small fraction of that whole. Man has his roots in all the 3 kingdoms. All have contributed to his equipment. He is the macrocosm of the lower microcosm. He is the link which unites the 3 lower kingdoms to the 3 higher. Let it ever be borne in mind that the sign of man's spiritual unfoldment lies in his ability to include in his consciousness not only the so-called spiritual values and the power to react to soul contact, but also to include the material values, and to react divinely to the potencies which lie hidden from him in the custody of the other forms of divine life, found in the three subhuman kingdoms. In the urgency of the present world situation, it might be well to ask, what need is there to study the rays and kingdoms of nature? Of what profit is it to speculate on matters of which it is as yet impossible for the average student to apprehend the truth? Such questions are intelligent and worthwhile and merit an intelligent reply. I shall make answer by asking another question. What indication has the would-be server that his mental equipment makes him of any use in this present world crisis? One of the first things that any teacher of the race has to do is to increase the mental equipment of the would-be server. The work is of times handicapped by the devoted offering of the emotional aspirant. The plan is ofttimes delayed in its fruition by the ill-timed and ill-judged efforts of the earnest follower of the great Lord. Above all else, the work is handicapped by the personality reactions of the leaders of the groups dedicated to esotericism. All personality reactions are, in the majority of cases, based upon emotion of some kind or another. Personal ambition, the desire, sometimes unrecognized, to be the supreme authority in a particular group, fear of interlopers and of terminologies, expressing identical truths, and jealousy of other leaders, plus a sincere though foggy and diluted interpretation of truth, are a great detriment to the cause of the hierarchy. And everywhere these things are to be seen. The seat of all this trouble is to be found in the desire-feeling emotional body, and in an undue attachment to externals and forms. These factors prevent that clear seeing which leads to wise and cooperative action. If the mental equipment and the mental apprehension of truth can be increased, then it may be possible for real work to be done, and then the groups that form the one group can go forward into real usefulness. To this end, it may be profitable to provide material whereby the mental bodies of the students can grow, and wherein they can find sustenance and the means to develop. Few people can evolve from within themselves the thoughts and the ideas which should lead them on in the realization of truth, and those of us therefore who are responsible for the teaching of the race must perforce provide that which is required. Also, in so doing we work for the coming generation of inquirers, knowing full well that the advanced teaching of today, and the new ideas which influence the pioneers of humanity, become the inspiration of the thinking public in the succeeding generation, and the theology, in due time, of that which follows them. The beliefs and knowledges of the esotericists today, of the real spiritual esotericists, not of the so-called esoteric groups, are resolved into the formulas of faith of their successors, and become eventually identified with religious beliefs and organizations. Mental comprehension of the ray teaching, and the study of the rays in relation to evolving nature, are of mental importance and of spiritual import, but of no practical value in the living of the daily life, except in so far as they serve to shift the polarization of the aspirant off the emotional plane onto the mental, and thereby produce alignment and stabilization. We now come to a consideration of the rays and of the vegetable kingdom. It is difficult for us to grasp the significance of the consciousness and the activity of the mineral kingdom, for it is so far removed from our own. It is hard for us really to understand, with our seeing consciousness, the fact that, for instance, our nails and teeth and bony structure have a consciousness and an intelligent awareness that is the same in kind, though differing in degree, as that of the eye or of a sensory nerve. But so it is. As we approach the forms of life which approximate the living tissue of our animal bodies, our appreciation of resemblance and of identical possibilities increases step by step. It is only by arguing from analogy that we grasp esoteric truth, and it might bring us some illumination if we realized that there are higher forms of life and consciousness in the cosmos who find it as difficult to throw their consciousness down into the animal forms of humanity as we would find it hard to project ourselves into the consciousness of an iron plowshare. But again, so it is. It is not my intention to give in this treatise what the reader can discover in the academic textbooks of our colleges. It is not my work to parallel the information found in the exoteric teachings and theologies of our modern sciences. I seek to indicate the synthesis which underlies the whole, and to point out the continuity of consciousness which can be noted by the esotericist. In so doing the part is seen to be integrated in the sum total, in a manner different to that which can be seen when considering the form. It is the world of causes with which we are primarily concerned, and even when we consider and study that which we include under the heading of results, it is as they demonstrate as initiated causes that we best arrive at their significance. It is as we grasp the radiatory potency of the mineral kingdom that we can begin to investigate the base of the evolutionary ladder and grasp the first steps taken by the life of God, through the medium of manifested forms. If, at the close of this writing, the student can grasp somewhat the meaning of those symbolic words, radiation, magnetism, experiment, transmutation and realization, and can understand that they embody the purpose and goal of each of the 5 kingdoms in nature with which we are basically concerned, then the emerging reality of consciousness will be seen, and the prevailing synthesis will be grasped. A. Life, radiance, magnetism. We are told in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali that by mastery of the binding life comes radiance, and in these words can be found the clue to the relation existing between the mineral and the human kingdoms. In other words, by the conscious control of the static mineral nature, as it expresses itself in man, comes his eventual radiatory activity. Thus, the spark becomes the flame. Patanjali 3.40, the light of the soul. It will be found that in the sutras much effective correlation can be made, particularly when considering any of the various quintuples found in manifestation with such frequency. This book is a basic treatise for initiatory training. Take, as an illustration of this, the words found in Book 3.44, and note the illumination thrown upon the evolutionary cycle and on the symbolic development of the 5 kingdoms in nature. 1. Pointed meditation upon the 5 forms which every element takes produces mastery over every element. These 5 forms are the gross nature, the elemental form, the quality, the pervasiveness and the basic purpose. You have, therefore, an analogy for consideration. 1. The gross nature. The mineral kingdom. 2. The elemental form. The vegetable kingdom. 3. The quality. The animal kingdom. 4. The pervasiveness. The human kingdom. 5. The basic purpose. The kingdom of souls. Note also the correlation of ideas which can be found as we study the words. By 1 pointed meditation upon the relationship existing between the body and the akasha, ascension out of matter, the 3 worlds, and power to travel in space is gained. The Light of the Soul, page 338. Patanjali 3.42. Here it is apparent how valuable is the teaching of this sutra, when the consciousness aspect is held carefully in mind, and how the relationships, on a larger scale than the simply human, become clear. 1. The body. Mineral kingdom. The dense prison of life. 2. The akasha. Vegetable kingdom. The fluid conscious life. 3. Ascension out of matter. Animal kingdom. The evolutionary goal of the relation between body and akasha. 4. Power to travel in space. Human kingdom. The goal of the human consciousness through the realization of the above 3. It is the inner relations with which I deal in this treatise, and with the inner ray influences, which bring about the desired outer results. It is the goal of the evolving consciousness which I seek to make clear. Science can handle with skill and insight the evolution of form. I shall endeavor to lay the ground for that coming science, of which modern psychology is the experimental beginning, which will deal as easily with the evolution of consciousness as modern science deals with the form expressions of life. Only when that newer science has been brought to the point of development at which material science now stands will it be possible to consider the evolution of life, through consciousness in form. I have here made a basic and synthetic statement which needs grasping. Those whose consciousness is expanding out of the human to the egoic will follow my reasoning with a measure of facility. A very apposite question might here be asked. What determines the ray which should govern or predominantly influence any or all of the various kingdoms in nature? It should be remembered that every kingdom, viewing it as a whole, is an entity, and, from its form side, the sum total of all forms constitutes that entity's body of manifestation. In the last analysis also, the aggregate of self-initiated influences, or the magnetic radiation of that particular kingdom, is an expression of that entity's basic quality or qualities, the aura of that entity's personality. Two rays govern each kingdom in nature, except in the case of the vegetable kingdom, where three rays indicate the nature of that kingdom's life. Students will possibly find it helpful to consider this problem from the angle of analogy, and to realize that they, as well as every other human being, are governed or actuated by two rays, i.e., the personality ray and the egoic ray. After the third initiation, the disciple has three rays active in him, for the ray of the monad begins then to make its presence felt. An analogous condition is found in all the kingdoms in nature. Two rays are dominant in each kingdom, but in the vegetable kingdom three rays control, for that kingdom is more evolved, along its own peculiar lines, than any other. What might be regarded as the monadic ray of the life of that kingdom is functioning. This whole matter must not be viewed from the standpoint of human consciousness, and the human standards of unfoldment and of awareness must not be regarded as holding prominent place in this evolution of divine life. This living entity has a different objective to the life which informs the fourth kingdom in nature. Nevertheless, three basic logoic influences, three major breaths, or three-ray vibrations account for this kingdom's life quality and appearance. This whole matter is too intricate for real comprehension, and the reader would do well simply to accept the statements I make, with reservations, and realize that when he himself is a member of the great company of initiates of the wisdom, that which is at present inexplicable to him may be made clear, and when fitted into its rightful place in the scheme of things will not seem so extraordinary or peculiar. B. The five secrets of the kingdoms in nature. There is a secret anent each of the five kingdoms in nature. These secrets concern the relation of the human evolution to the whole, and they are revealed to the initiate at the five initiations. At each initiation one of the five secrets is explained to the initiate, and they are called by the following five names, which are an attempt on my part to interpret symbolically the ancient name or sign. 1. The mineral kingdom. The secret of the brilliance of the light. 2. The vegetable kingdom. The secret of the sacred perfume. 3. The animal kingdom. The secret of the following scent. 4. The human kingdom. The secret of the double path or of the double breath. 5. The kingdom of souls. The secret of the golden rose of light. The symbolic forms in which these five secrets are hidden, and so conveyed to the intelligence of the initiate, are as follows. 1. The mineral secret. A diamond, blue-white in color. 2. The vegetable secret. A cube of sandalwood in the heart of the lotus. 3. The animal secret. A bunch of cypress, over a funeral urn. 4. The human secret. A twisted golden cord, with 7 knots. 5. The egoic secret. A closed lotus bud with 7 blue rays. Be all this as it may, certain of the 7 logoic influences are at this time dominant in the 5 kingdoms, in 4 cases, 2 rays control, in the case of the vegetable kingdom, 3 rays control. It must not be forgotten that these rays are related to each other, and in the great interfacing and interlocking of the planetary and the solar forces every kingdom comes under the influence of every ray, yet with certain rays always controlling and certain others dominating cyclically. The rays determine the quality of the manifesting life and indicate the type of the appearance. In resuming our consideration of the 3 divisions of the vegetable kingdom, it might be stated that Ray V determines the type, family, appearance, strength, size and nature of the trees upon our planet. Ray 2 is the beneficent influence, expressing itself through the cereals and flowers. Ray IV is the life quality, expressing itself through the grasses and the smaller forms of vegetable life, those which provide the green carpet whereon the angels dance. An important symbolic happening has been consummated at the close of this Piscean age, which is the period of the 6th ray influence. This has been the worldwide devastation of the forests of the world. Everywhere they have been sacrificed to the needs of man. Thus have been brought under the influence of fire, those vegetable forms of life which were ready for the initiation. The major agency in the development of this kingdom has been water, and this new development, this bringing together of fire and water in this kingdom, has constituted the subjective fact which brought the steam age into being. The vast forest fires, which form such a menace at this time in different parts of the world, are also related to this initiation by fire, of a kingdom hitherto controlled and directed in its growth by the element of water. Similarly, the coming in of the seventh ray inaugurated a tremendous event in the mineral kingdom. This I referred to in an earlier book. Through the effect of sound and fire, the mineral kingdom has also been initiated, and in the Great World War, in the steel factories and the other factories where metal is transmuted into articles for the use of man, the world of minerals, and the entity which informs that world, are passing through a major initiation. This was made possible by the personality ray of the entity, manifesting through this kingdom, subjecting itself to the initiatory fire. This is of course expressed symbolically, the only way in which any aspect of this planetary truth can be grasped by man. It is an interesting, though quite unimportant fact, that at all the initiations of the kingdoms in nature, the planetary logos of a particular ray always functions as the initiator. This ray cyclically alters. In the major initiations at this time, for instance, in connection with humanity, not only is the first initiator, the Christ, officiating, not only is the Ancient of Days, the embodiment of our planetary logos, participating, either actively or behind the scenes, but behind them both stands now the Lord of the fifth ray of knowledge and understanding. One point of interest might here be noted. It is known esoterically that the vegetable kingdom is the transmitter and the transformer of the vital pranic fluid to the other forms of life on our planet. That is its divine and unique function. This pranic fluid, in its form of the astral light, is the reflector of the divine Akasha. The second plane therefore reflects itself in the astral plane. Those who seek to read the Akashic records, or who endeavor to work upon the astral plane with impunity, and there to study the reflection of events in the astral light correctly, have perforce and without exception to be strict vegetarians. It is this ancient Atlantean lore which lies behind the vegetarians' insistence upon the necessity for a vegetarian diet, and which gives force and truth to this injunction. It is the failure to conform to this wise rule which has brought about the misinterpretations of the astral and Akashic records by many of the psychics of the present time, and has given rise to the wild and incorrect reading of past lives. Only those who have been for 10 years strict vegetarians can work thus in what might be called the record aspect of the astral light. When they add to their purified astral and physical bodies the light of reason and illumination of the focused mind, which is very rarely found, then they become accurate interpreters of astral phenomena. Their link with the vegetable kingdom is then very close and unbreakable, and that link or binding chain will lead them through the door to the scene of their investigations. But unless the goal of a vegetarian diet is this field of service, the arguments for its following and for that form of diet are usually futile and of no real moment. From the standpoint of the eternal verities, what a man eats or wears are seen in a connotation very different to that of the one-pointed fanatic. Let me again reiterate that this whole problem of the taking of life, whether in the vegetable or the animal kingdom, is a far bigger one than we know, and should be approached from an angle different, not only in degree but in kind, to that of the taking of life in the human family. The three aspects of divinity meet in man, and with the destiny of a divine Son of God no one must interfere. Where the two aspects of divinity are concerned, as in the subhuman kingdoms, the attitude can be otherwise, and the emerging truth is different to that which the little minds believe. The influence of the three rays, blended together in the vegetable kingdom, being also the three rays of even numbers, 2, 4, 6, has produced a fourfold perfection in this kingdom which is unparalleled in any other. The rays are responsible for this result, and their effect can be seen in the following analysis. Ray 2. The result of this influence, pouring cyclically through the kingdom, has been to produce its magnetism, its attractiveness. Ray IV. This ray of struggle and of conflict has as its objective the production of harmony between form and life, and has brought about the synthesis and the harmony of color in nature. As we say the words, color in nature, automatically we think of the vegetable kingdom and its achievement of harmony in vegetation. Ray V. Growth towards the light is the effect of this ray influence, plus the normal tendency of all lifeforms to evolve. It has brought the latent seeds of the vegetable kingdom, inherent within the soil, to the surface. It constitutes the energy of externalization. The united effect of these three rays, working in unison, has been to bring forth the fourth result, the perfume of the flowers, as found in the higher units of the vegetable kingdom. This perfume can be either deadly or vitalizing, and can either delight or repel. It attracts and constitutes part of the aroma of this kingdom, which is sensed in the planetary aura, though unrecognized as a whole by humanity. You isolate a perfume. Yet the perfume of an entire kingdom is a well-recognized phenomenon to the initiate. Students would find it of interest to trace similar analogies in the other kingdoms in nature, remembering however that this kingdom is esoterically ahead of the others, for there are three rays participating in its perfecting. It might be stated that three rays will ultimately affect each of the other three kingdoms. During the next subrace, Ray 2 will begin to influence the mineral kingdom. In the next root race, Ray 5 will commence to pour its power into the animal kingdom, gradually stimulating the instinctual mind of the animal until it vibrates to the ray of the intellect, of knowledge. This will bring about an organizing of the animal brain, and the transfer of the power of the solar plexus center to the head center, and consequently a shift in the animal polarization and an added activity of the brain in the head. Towards the close of this round, the monadic ray of the advanced units of humanity will be so powerful that there will be a marked pouring in of Ray 1, with its stimulation of the individual will. You will therefore have in this unfoldment of the will aspect of mankind the following stages, which are of psychological importance. 1. Instinct. 2. Emotional aspiration. 3. Intellect. 4. Mental one-pointedness. 5. Egoic purpose. 6. Spiritual will. 7. Divine intent. These stages are latent in all of us, and are related to the 7 principles of man. They will express themselves in advanced humanity as aspects of the psyche, and therefore psychologically, during the later stages of human development. They should begin to be of greater interest to investigators and to educators who should seek to develop them in the child and the adolescent. They work out today as marked stages in the development of all disciples and initiates. They indicate place upon the path. Hence their practical usefulness. In the kingdom of souls, Ray 4 will complete the work of the next 2 rounds, but this period is so far distant that with it we need not concern ourselves. In the vegetable kingdom, the work of the second ray of love-wisdom is seen, symbolically, in one of its major consummations. Attractiveness, in the sense of beauty, of color, of form, of distribution, and of perfume, is to be seen on every hand, and had you but the eyes to vision the reality, the synthesis of life would appear to you in all its glory. But just as the last of the 5 senses to make its presence felt in man, the sense of smell, is as yet but little understood, and its implications are not realized, whilst its relation to the analytical and discriminative mind is not appreciated scientifically, so that attractiveness, esoterically speaking, of the vegetable kingdom remains uncomprehended. It is the radiant garment of the planet, and is revealed by the sun. It is the achieved expression of the informing life of this kingdom in nature, and is the effect of the manifestation of the 3 divine and functioning aspects of this peculiar Son of Divinity, as he works out his destiny in form and through matter. The entire problem of magnetism is closely connected with the problem of sex. In the occult study of the dissemination of the seed life and the germs of the vegetable kingdom, and in the understanding of the part played therein by those miraculously developed organisms, the ants and bees, and later in the investigation of the work of the etheric builders, the elves and fairies, by those with awakened vision will come a new light upon sex and upon the function it serves in the interrelation of lives and the creation of forms. With this aspect of this deeply esoteric truth I cannot here deal, for it is the effective activity in the solar lives of the solar system, and with these we cannot concern ourselves. It is not possible to handle the subject in such a way as to make it of constructive value to the average reader. What is not of immediate esoteric value at this time of world urgency may well be relegated to a later time. C. The planets and the kingdoms. In the vegetable kingdom, the influence of Venus is predominant, amazing as this may seem to some occult students. Venus and Jupiter together powerfully influence this world of forms. It might be of interest to note that all the planets have a close relation to all the kingdoms, but that this relation should not be confounded with the planetary rays or with the fact that some of the planets are considered as sacred planets, and some are not. I am here using the words planetary influence in the same sense as the astrologer uses them, for he is not dealing, either, with the basic planetary rays. It might be stated therefore that the planetary relations in this cycle are as follows. 1. The mineral kingdom. Pluto and Vulcan. 2. The vegetable kingdom. Venus and Jupiter. 3. The animal kingdom. The Moon and Mars. 4. The human kingdom. Mercury and Saturn. 5. The kingdom of souls. Neptune and Uranus. 6. Synthesizing these 5. The Sun. There are other planetary influences to be felt, and hidden forces likewise play upon our planetary life, but these are the major influences bringing about the desired results in the kingdoms of nature under the plan. It must be remembered that these are the cyclic influences dominant at this time, and that they change from cycle to cycle. For instance, a disciple who is upon the path is strongly influenced by Mercury and by Saturn, but when he begins his training for the first initiation he has to contend with the influences of Pluto and Vulcan. The training for the second initiation brings him under Neptunian influences with Venus and Jupiter contending for control. The link with the vegetable kingdom is then strong, and hence the frequent recognition of astral perfumes, which the disciple can note. Before the first initiation, the static mineral world within him has been broken up. At the third initiation, the Moon and Mars struggle to assume ascendancy, and there is his battleground. Hence at the Great Transfiguration, the body is transfigured as the indication of triumph. At the fourth initiation, Mercury and Saturn act as the great translators, and bring the disciple to the door of realization. When the final initiation is taken, it is the activity of Uranus and the inpouring force of Jupiter that bring about the reorganization which results in the final emancipation. The vastness and complexity of the subject thus become apparent. In the emergence of color in the vegetable kingdom another vast influence is seen, and the problem of the ray influences becomes still more complicated. In the basic color, green, we have the indication of the potency of Saturn. Esoterically speaking, the vegetable kingdom is upon an advanced stage of the path of discipleship, and hence Saturn and Mars are active. The influence of the latter planet is to be seen in the prevalence of the colors red, rose, yellow and orange in the flowers at this time. Again, readers would find it interesting to note mentally the relation of growth to the idealism of the sixth ray. They could learn therefrom the part that the ray of devotion plays in bringing about the urge to evolve. It is growth towards an ideal, or towards a divine prototype or archetype. Here is where the secret of this kingdom appears. The secret is hidden in the word transformation, for the rays 2.4.6 are the great transformers. The clue to the secret is to be found in the processes of assimilation and in the building forces that transmute the assimilated minerals, the absorbed moisture, the food in the air, and the proffered offering of the insect kingdoms into the manifested bodies, the radiant colors, the magnetic auras, and the distilled perfumes of this kingdom. Much along this line has been the subject of investigation by the modern scientist, but until he recognizes the fact of ray influences, and the part they play in the producing of these factors, he will fail to discover the true secret of the transformations which he notes. It will appear, therefore, to the careful reader, that in the relation of the rays to the kingdoms in nature, and in the similarity of the rays found functioning in widely differing kingdoms, will be found their point of contact or door of entry, whereby they can contact each other. For instance, the human and the vegetable kingdoms find their point of influential entry, using the words in the esoteric sense, through ray 4, which influences the forms in both kingdoms. The relation between the vegetable kingdom and the kingdom of souls is found along the second ray. Ray 2 is beginning to make its presence felt in the mineral kingdom, and hence man's work with, and facility in using materially, the forms in this kingdom. Perhaps I should say, misusing them. Ray 5 will before long, as we have noted, make its power felt in the animal kingdom, and an ever closer relation will then be set up between men and animals. Again, the rays in incarnation at any time will establish relations between the kingdoms, increasing the interplay of forces and the interchange of energies, and thus producing new effects. New forms of life, and new wonders in the world of phenomena. Man is also apt to think that his ray influences, the ray predominant in his own kingdom, must be of paramount importance and the most potent. This is not so at this time. A careful study and a true analysis of the effect and work of the rays in connection with the animal kingdom is not possible. Yet it must be remembered that the roots of human psychology lie hidden in this expression of God. Humanity is an expression of two aspects of the soul, the animal soul and the divine soul, and these two, blended and fused in man, constitute the human soul. It is this fact that is the cause of man's special problems, and it is these two factors which involve him in the long struggle which eventuates in the liberation of the divine soul, through the sublimation of the animal soul. In these words lie much food for thought. The twain shall be one. This work is begun in the animal kingdom, and constitutes its secret, and hence the use of the word transfusion in this connection. Individualization was the first result of this secret process. Its final consummating effect can be seen in the 5 stages of the initiatory process, leading to eventual transfiguration and liberation. The entire work is, however, one great unfolding revelation of the soul of God, and it is only when we divorce humanity from that process of revelation that we find the secrets, the problems, the difficulties and the mysteries insoluble. A consciousness, an awareness and a sensitivity to an ever-widening and more inclusive contact is gradually being developed, and this is the consciousness of God, the awareness of the solar logos, and the sensitivity of the cosmic Son of God. The form through which that life expresses itself, the sensitive response apparatus through which that consciousness works, are of secondary importance, and are in the nature of an automatic mechanism. It is the mechanism, nevertheless, with which we have hitherto identified ourselves, and we have forgotten that that mechanism is but an expression of an aspect of consciousness, and that it indicates, at any particular time, the point of evolution of the informing entity. Let me reiterate. The two factors which are of major importance, during manifestation, are the evolving consciousness and the manifesting life. When this is borne in mind, it will be noted how each stage upon the way can be seen whole as a kingdom in nature. Each of these kingdoms carries the consciousness aspect forward to a greater stage of perfection, and demonstrates a greater sensitivity and responsiveness to outer and inner environing conditions, than does the preceding kingdom. Each manifests a fuller revelation of the inner and hidden glory. When, however, a unit of life is immersed in form, and when the consciousness is identified, in time and space, with any particular form, it is not possible for it to realize its divinity or to express it consciously. Its psychology is that of the partial and the particular, and not that of the universal and the whole. The greater and closer the identification with the form aspect, the greater is the lower unity and synthesis, but at the same time, the greater the darkness and, speaking symbolically, the denser is the prison. Such is the consciousness in the lower or subhuman kingdoms in nature. The more the unit of life is identified with, the one who is conscious, the greater again is the higher, yet different, unity and synthesis. Such also is the consciousness of the 3 higher kingdoms, the superhuman. The tragedy, the problem and the glory of man is that he can identify himself with both aspects, the form and the life, and his psychological state is such that during the period wherein he forms part of the human kingdom, his consciousness fluctuates between these pairs of opposites. He can identify himself with the subhuman forms, and this he invariably does in the early stages. He can identify himself with the life aspect, and this he does in the final stages. In the midway stage of the average man, he is torn violently between both, and is himself the battleground. With this consciousness, incident upon an awareness of the pairs of opposites, is connected the entire problem of pain and of suffering, as we today understand it. The animal suffers, but suffers entirely physically and sentiently. Man suffers, but suffers physically, sentiently, and also mentally, and the mental suffering is due to the development in him of certain aspects of the lower mind: anticipation, memory, imagination, the power to visualize, remorse, and the inherent urge to reach out after divinity, which brings with it a sense of loss and of failure. The sufferings of God himself, to which the scriptures of the world so often mysteriously refer, are divorced from sentiency, and are mental and intuitive. But on this mystery we need not enlarge. The sufferings of humanity are primarily personal; of God, they are preeminently impersonal and related to the whole. I have touched on this as I wanted you to get a picture of the synthesis of the unfoldment from the inchoate to the sentient, from the sentient to the mentally realized, and from the mentally realized to the divinely appreciated, as it is occultly termed. I give you pictures, but they are pictures of a whole. Endeavor to think in wholes, and try not to fit every point of detail into the whole, but remember that what may appear to be a contradiction may be but a fragment of temporary detail for which you, as yet, see no place or explanation. In the animal kingdom, the first dim indication of sorrow and pain is seen, whilst in the higher and the domesticated animals these two educating processes are still more clearly indicated. Man's work with the animals is potent in results, and will lead eventually to a reopening of the door into the human kingdom. Some of the work already done by man has outstripped divine expectation and may warrant a hastening of the plan. Let us now tabulate our points anent this kingdom and the rays, as we did with the other two kingdoms. 3. The animal kingdom. Influences. The third ray of active intelligence or of adaptability is potent in this kingdom and will express itself increasingly as time goes on, until it can best be described as animal one-pointedness. Then, at this point and cyclically, the sixth ray of devotion or idealism can make its pressure felt as the urge towards a goal, and thus produce a relation to man which makes of him the desired goal. This is to be seen through the medium of the tamed, the trained and the domestic animals. Results. In the one case we find the third ray producing the emergence of instinct, which in its turn creates and uses that marvelous response apparatus we call the nervous system, the brain, and the five senses which lie behind and which are responsible for them as a whole. It should be noted that, wide as we may regard the difference between man and the animals, it is really a much closer relation than that existing between the animal and the vegetable. In the case of the sixth ray, we have the appearance of the power to be domesticated and trained, which is, in the last analysis, the power to love, to serve and to emerge from the herd into the group. Ponder on the words of this last paradoxical statement. Process. This is called concretization. In this kingdom we have for the first time a true organization of the etheric body into what are called by the esotericist, the true nerves and the sensory centers. Plants also have nerves, but they have in them nothing of the same intricacy of relation and of plexus as we find in the human being and in the animal. Both kingdoms share the same general grouping of nerves, of force centers and channels, with a spinal column and a brain. This organization of a sensitive response apparatus constitutes, in reality, the densification of the subtle etheric body. Secret. This is called transfusion, which is a very inadequate word to express the early blending, in the animal, of the psychological factors which lead to the process of individualization. It is a process of life-giving, of intelligent integration and of psychological unfoldment, to meet emergency. Purpose. This is called experimentation. Here we come to a great mystery, and one that is peculiar to our planet. In many esoteric books it has been stated and hinted that there has been a mistake, or a serious error, on the part of God himself, of our planetary logos, and that this mistake has involved our planet and all that it contains in the visible misery, chaos and suffering. The objective of the experiment might be stated as follows. It is the intent of the planetary logos to bring about a psychological condition which can best be described as one of divine lucidity. The work of the psyche, and the goal of the true psychology, is to see life clearly, as it is, and with all that is involved. This does not mean conditions and environment, but life. This process was begun in the animal kingdom, and will be consummated in the human. These are described in the Old Commentary as the two eyes of deity, both blind at first, but which later see, though the right eye sees more clearly than the left. The first dim indication of this tendency towards lucidity is seen in the faculty of the plant to turn towards the sun. It is practically non-existent in the mineral kingdom. Divisions. First, the higher animals and the domestic animals, such as the dog, the horse and the elephant. Secondly, the so-called wild animals, such as the lion, the tiger, and the other carnivorous and dangerous wild animals. Thirdly, the mass of lesser animals that seem to meet no particular need nor to fill any special purpose, such as the harmless yet multitudinous lives found in our forests, our jungles and the fields of our planet. Instances of these in the West are the rabbits and other rodents. This is a wide and general specification of no scientific import at all, but it covers adequately the karmic divisions and the general conformation into which these groupings of lives fall in this kingdom. Objective agency. Fire and water, fierce desire and incipient mind. These are symbolized in the animal power to eat and drink. Subjective agency. Smell or scent, the instinctual discovery of that which is needed, from the activity of ranging forth for food and the use of the power to scent that food, to the identification of the smell of a beloved master and friend. Quality. Tamas or inertia, but in this case it is the tamasic nature of mind and not that of matter, as usually understood. The chitta or mind stuff can be equally tamasic. The two problems which are of immediate concern to mankind in relation to the animal kingdom are the problem of human relations and responsibility, the problem of animal individualization. Human relations to animals. Only a few hints can as yet be given, and those must be along the line of information anent the rays at work in both kingdoms. The two problems, particularly the second one, are of vast intricacy, and would require many volumes to be properly elucidated. Right exegesis is not yet possible, nor could man yet understand. The first point to be emphasized in connection with human responsibility in relation to the animals is that the animal world embodies two divine aspects, two divine principles, and two major rays are concerned with their expression or manifestation. These two aspects are found also in man, and it is along these two lines, which man shares in unison with the animals, that man's responsibility and work lie, and through the use of these two aspects of divine energy will he realize his task and carry it to completion. The same divine activity and the same divine innate intelligence are found in the form aspect of both kingdoms. They are inherent in matter itself. But this third ray of divine intelligence functions more potently and influences more powerfully in the animal kingdom than in man. This is an item of information not hitherto given out. The second ray is of course present in its form-building aspect, as herd instinct and as the basis of the sex relation among animal bodies. It is found performing a similar function among human beings, and along these two lines of energy will the points of contact be found and the opportunity to assume responsibility. Yet it should be noted that, in the last analysis, animals have more to give men than men have to give animals, where these particular powers and functions are concerned. In the human family another divine aspect is found functioning, which is that of the will, of directed purpose, of planned objective, and of intelligent design or plan. These qualities are inherent in man, and constitute an aspect of the divine mind not found actively present in the animal, as a rule. However, as the animal kingdom comes increasingly under human influence and the steady trend towards domesticity makes itself felt, we shall see emerging a measure of purposive objective, and one means towards this end is to be found in the turning of the animal's love and attention towards his master. In this illustration some of the responsibility of man to the animal world is expressed. The domestic animals have to be trained to participate in the action of applied will. This, man seems as yet to interpret as the will of the animal to love his master, but it is something deeper and more fundamental than the satisfying of man's love to be loved. The true and intelligent training of the wild animals, and their adaptation to the conditions of ordered living, are part of the divine process of integrating the plan and of producing an ordered and harmonious expression of the divine intent. It is through the power of thought that man will eventually bridge the gap existing between the animal kingdom and man, and it must be done by man's directed, controlled thought, controlling and directing the animal consciousness. It is not done through the evocation of love, fear or pain. It is intended to be a purely mental process and a unique mental stimulation. The relation of the animals to man has been purely physical in the long past ages. Animals preyed upon men in the days when animal man was but little removed from them. It is oft forgotten that there was a stage in human development when animal man and the existent forms of animal life lived in a much closer relation than today. Then, only the fact of individualization separated them. It was, however, an individualization so little realized that the difference between the mindless animal, so-called, and infant humanity was scarcely appreciable. In those distant eons, much transpired which has been lost in the dark silence of the past. The animal world was then far more potent than the human. Men were helpless before the onslaughts of the animals, and the devastation wrought by animals upon early animal men in mid-Lemurian days was terrible and appalling. Little nomadic groups of human beings would be completely wiped out, age after age, by the powerful animal life of the period, and though instinct taught the animal men to take certain precautions, it was an instinct but little removed from that found in their enemies. It was only as the millennia of years passed away, and human intelligence and cunning began to assert themselves, that humanity became more powerful than the animals and in its turn devastated the animal kingdom. Up until 200 years ago, the toll of life exacted by the animal world from the human, in the forests of the western continents, in Africa, in the primeval lands of Australia and in the islands of the tropic seas, was incalculable. This is a fact often forgotten in the sentimentality of a moment, but it lies at the root of man's cruelty to animals. It is but the inevitable karma of the animal kingdom working out. The question must be viewed from a larger scale than has hitherto been the case, and its true historic values must be better understood before man can intelligently decide what constitutes his problem of responsibility and how it should be met and solved. In Atlantean days, the purely physical relation was tempered by an astral or emotional relation, and the time came when some of the animals were swept within the orbit of human life and were tamed and cared for, and when the first of the domestic animals appeared. A new era began, wherein certain of the animals evoked affection from certain humans, and a new influence was brought to play upon this third kingdom in nature. This started during a cycle when the second ray and the sixth ray were both functioning simultaneously, and wherein their major and their lesser cycles coincided. This is a rare occurrence, and when it happens the guardians of the race seize the opportunity to produce major results or to inaugurate new moves whereby the divine plan may be more rapidly developed. To offset the fear found in humanity as a whole, as far as the animal world was concerned, the opportunity was offered by the guardians of the race to bring men and animals into a closer relation, and because a cycle was present in which love and devotion were pouring upon, into and through all forms, a good deal of the fear present was offset. Since that time the number of the domestic animals has steadily increased. The relation between the two kingdoms is now dual physical and emotional. To this there has been added, during the past 200 years, a third relation, that of the mind. The mental power of humanity will, in the last analysis, be the controlling factor, and through its means the three subhuman kingdoms will be brought under the control of man. This has been happening with great rapidity in the mineral kingdom and in the vegetable kingdom. It is not yet accomplished where the animal kingdom is concerned, but the process is rapidly going forward. Not much progress will be made during the incoming seventh ray cycle, though as law and order and rhythm are imposed upon the planet, and as chaos gives place to organization, we shall see those areas on the planet wherein the animals still rule increasingly lessened, and certain species will die out unless they are preserved in sanctuaries. B. Individualization. It is of course apparent that the effect of the interrelation existing between animals and men is to produce in the former that step forward which is called individualization. This event is a consummation of the process of transfusion, and indicates the appearance of the three divine aspects in a unit of life in form. A Son of God, a Lord of dedicated and directed will, is born, and the third divine principle of purposive energy is fused with the other two and brings about an entire reorganization within the animal form. As esotericists have long pointed out, individualization is a great planetary experiment, and when it was instituted it superseded the earlier method, employed upon the Moon, wherein the urge to reach out and on, called aspiration where man is concerned, was the method employed. This really means that, when the evolving life within the form had reached a certain stage of growth in sentiency and awareness, and the inner urge was adequately strong, the life forced itself into contact with another stream of divine expression, with another major ray manifestation. This union of various activities caused a new being to emerge into manifestation. This is the basic truth lying behind the ideas put out at this time and classified under the general term, emergent evolution. It governs still in many departments of nature, and used to govern the appearance of human beings upon the planet. The urge and the development are from within the organism itself, and are the result of growth, of a reaching out and of an expansion. But the method usually employed at this time is in the nature of a great second-ray experiment. This involves an activity from without, from above, from a higher or from the divine side, if such a use of relatively meaningless words can avail to depict the process. The urge or push in this case does not originate from the lower two expressions or earlier fusions of divine energies. It is the higher aspect of divinity which takes the initiative and which, through a stimulation applied from without, causes a response from the life in form. Hence the process is really in the nature of an initiation. The animals which individualize are, in every case today, the domestic animals, such as the horse, the dog, the elephant and the cat. These four groups of animals are at this time in the process of transfusion, as it is occultly called, and one by one the life units are prepared and brought to the door of that peculiar initiatory process which we call, for lack of a better term, individualization. They wait in that condition until the word goes forth that that door may. The triple way that leads to the dual road, by treading which they stand at last before the golden door. This final door ushers them upon that path which is the one, alone and single, and disappears into the light. Old Commentary. The factors which determine individualization are several in number, and some of them might be enumerated as follows. 1. The response of the instinctive nature of the animal to the mental atmosphere of the human being, or beings, with which it is surrounded. 2. The outgoing love and interest of the people to which the animal is attached by the bonds of affection or of service. 3. The ray impulses which are active at any time. These are, amongst others, a. The ray of the animal itself. Elephants are upon the first ray. Dogs are expressions of the second ray. The cat is a third-ray life manifestation, and the horse is sixth ray. Animals upon other rays are not yet ready for individualization. *1. b. The ray of the particular person or persons with whom the animal is associated. c. The ray or rays of a particular periodic cycle. I could give you the techniques with which the guardians of the races and kingdoms work when seeking to bring about individualization, but of what purpose would it be and what use would such information serve? Each ray affects the units found upon it at such a crisis as individualization in a manner differing from any other ray. Each ray finds its point of prime contact through one or other of the centers in the etheric bodies of animals and men. It must be remembered in this connection that, in the animal, 4 centers are functioning, and 3 are present but latent in their effect and use. The process followed is that each ray works or pours its energy through one or other of the centers in the etheric body of that entity who informs an entire kingdom in nature, and then through that particular center galvanizes the individualizing unit into the needed activity. Later, when the ray effects, psychologically speaking, are better understood, and the centers, with their 7 ray vibrations, have been more deeply studied, it will be found that through a particular center and along a particular ray vibration, forms of life and centers of consciousness can be contacted and known. This applies to all forms in all kingdoms, subhuman or superhuman. One of the first ways in which man is learning this truth is through the discovery of that vibration, emanating from a particular master, which produces a reaction in himself, and which calls forth a response. Thus he is enabled to find out upon which ray his soul is found and to which ray group he should be attracted. This is of importance to the aspirant, and should be considered more carefully than has hitherto been the case, for by it the aspirant determines the nature and the quality of his soul type, and of the center through which he, occultly speaking, goes out upon the path. He discovers likewise the group of forms and of lives with which he is linked, to which he must render service, and by which he can be served. The relation of the rays to the centers in the average aspirant might be classified as follows. 1. Head center. Ray of will or power. First ray. 2. The ajna center. Ray of concrete knowledge. Fifth ray. 3. The throat center. Ray of active intelligence. Third ray. 4. The heart center. Ray of love wisdom. Second ray. 5. The solar plexus. Ray of devotion. Sixth ray. 6. The sacral center. Ray of ceremonial magic. Seventh ray. 7. Base of spine. Ray of harmony. Fourth ray. These rays and their corresponding centers warrant most careful study. They are comprehensive and revealing. Note, for instance, that at this time the seventh ray governs and expresses itself through the sacral center, that which controls the sex life and the building of forms of expression. Therefore it swings now into activity and pours through this particular center in order to organize and produce the appearance of those new forms through which all life in the new cycle, astrologically understood and periodically and cyclically understood, may express itself. Thus it was necessary for the sex life to be controlled by this type of energy in order to bring about the needed changes, and hence also one of the great results of the influence of the incoming seventh ray has been the increase in the mental interest in sex. A study also of the ray influences in this present historic period, and their relation to the rays, will reveal the accuracy and suggestiveness of the above ray tabulation. The relation of man to the animals is, as we have seen, physical, emotional and increasingly mental. Each race of men, in its turn, and working under the ray influences, produces definite effects upon the three subhuman kingdoms. Through humanity, when the great experiment of individualization was initiated, the energies or ray influences from the superhuman kingdoms were focused and the great function of humanity began, which is the transmitting of the ray forces cyclically. Though the six-pointed star is, at this time, the symbol of the creative work, viewing the work as a whole, the downward-pointing triangle, balanced on an upward-pointing triangle, will someday present a truer picture of the creative and preserving function of the fourth kingdom. See the 5 points of contact. There are 5 points of contact whereby the material world can be occultly raised up into life and power, just as there are 5 centers always to be found in our planet, through which life and energy pour into the natural world. I refer here to certain centers which are active where the physical and material life of the planet are concerned. There are also, as I told you in my writing anent the development during the next 3 years, 5 centers through which a new and energizing spiritual force is flowing, and these are the planetary correspondences to the 5 senses in man, both subjective and objective. But we find the rays pouring through humanity as a whole, and through the 5 races of men, our present race, the Aryan, being the third, 2 are yet to come. This particular aspect of ray energy is that which stimulates the consciousness aspect, and it will raise and awaken the consciousness hidden in all material forms, both in man and in the 3 subhuman kingdoms. These 5 points, with their fire, elevating, influences, are as follows, omitting the 2 earlier and intangible races which are not strictly human at all, and beginning with the first of the 5 races which are human throughout. 1. The Lemurian race. Fifth ray. The coming of the sons of fire. 2. The Atlantean race. Sixth ray. The devotion of the lords of love. 3. The Aryan race. Third ray. The activity of the men of mind. 4. The coming race. Fourth ray. The vision of the units of light. 5. The final race. First ray. The will of the lords of sacrifice. The 2 earlier races were governed by the second and seventh rays, respectively, and embody the activity of the form builder and the constructive energy of the magical organizer. The reader must bear in mind, as he studies these major ray cycles, that they cover inconceivably long periods of time, and produce 2 effects which must be considered. First, the ray energies, 5 in number, play upon the human kingdom itself, and in the course of the ages raise man from the dead to life. They lift him out of the dark prison of matter into the light of day. These are the 5 life-giving forces that raise the human consciousness to heaven, and the form to understanding. I know no word to express the concept except the word understanding, and its true sense is seen when divided into its 2 component parts. Secondly, these ray energies, working this time through the human kingdom, raise the subhuman kingdoms in nature also, after much effort, to life and conscious understanding. Through the 5 points of spiritual contact, in each of the 3 kingdoms, is life brought to nature itself. For this the whole creation groaneth and travaileth together in pain until now. Herein is found the secret of the resurrection, viewing it in the planetary sense, a resurrection enacted also individually by each achieving Son of God. This is the great Masonic secret, and the central mystery of the sublime or 3rd degree in Masonry. It is sometimes occultly referred to as the relation of death to the 5 life-giving energies seen working upon the 3rd day of revelation. Or, speaking still more symbolically, in the chamber of death, the blue light of dawning day reveals the group of workers who seek to raise the dead. Not avail their efforts until they blend the 5 great forces of the Lord of Magic. When thus they work as one, in unity complete the work is done, they fuse the life-giving force. The dead are raised, and the work of building can proceed. The temple can be glorified and the word be uttered forth within a chamber of life-giving force and not of death. Through death to life, from struggle in the dark to building in the light. Such is the plan. Thus do we enter into life that is a death, pass onward through the door whose pillars twain stand there forever as a sign of strength and truth divine. Thus do we enter quick within the tomb and die. Thus are we raised again upon a word divine, upon a 5-fold sign, and, springing forth, we live. Then in relation to humanity, the old commentary says, the lords of the 5th great ray of mind have sent us on our way. The lords of the 6th great ray forced us to suffer in the cause, yet love it too, and through our deep devotion learn. The lords of the 3rd great ray bring us, through mind, unto the funeral pyre, to the stage wherein we die, yet rise again. In the 3rd room, and on the 3rd dark day, the master disappears. He dies, is lost to sight. But the 5 great lords unite their forces. In fellowship sublime, they work to raise the dead. Only thus can that word be spoken which brings the dead to life. Such is the work of man for God, of God for man. Cyclic manifestation. So the work proceeds. The rays stream forth in 1. A solar cycle, such as the present one, in which the 2nd ray of love wisdom is the major ray, and all the others are but subsidiary to it. 2. A planetary cycle, such as those we have just considered in connection with the races, the 5 above enumerated and their 5 controlling rays. 3. Cycles connected with the 12 signs of the zodiac. These are primarily 2 in number. A. Those which are connected with a complete zodiacal round, about 25,000 years. B. Those which are connected with each of the 12 signs, and which come in and out of manifestation approximately every 2,100 years. 4. Those cycles when certain rays are in power for a period of racial evolution, such as the 5 major racial periods to which we have referred. 5. The lesser cycling in and out of manifestation, as referred to earlier in this treatise. 6. Cycles of ray activity which are determined by their numerical figures. The first ray, for instance, governs all cycles such as those of 1,000,000 years, 100,000 years, 1,000 years, 100 years and 1 year. The 7th ray controls such similar cycles as 7,000 years and 7,000,000 years. The interchange and interplay of these ray cycles is so intricate and so great that it would serve only to confuse should I further elaborate. Remember, however, that all of the 7 rays are forever functioning, and functioning simultaneously, but that cyclically and under the directed plan of the minds, who are embodied by the rays, certain of these influences and forces are more dominant at one time than at another, and certain lines of activity and certain results of this activity are demonstrated under one ray influence more than under another. These influences pour through all forms in all kingdoms, producing specific effects, definite and different forms of life, peculiar types of realization, and particular expressions of consciousness in form which are, for that period, the product of the united and concerted plan of the building forces, working in complete harmony, but temporarily under one or another of their number. They enter into constructive activity, they pass through that particular cycle, they then pass out, or die to that activity, and are then raised into heaven, until such time as their cycle again comes round. This process they constantly enact and reenact, repeating the drama of birth, death and resurrection. In this ray activity will be found the true significance of the law of rebirth, and it lies behind the process of incarnation and of reincarnation. Upon this I may not here dwell, beyond pointing out that men's ideas and teaching anent reincarnation are as yet childish and inaccurate. Much readjustment must be made, and much rearrangement of ideas is necessitated, before a true understanding of this basic cyclic law will be possible. Cyclic appearance, therefore, governs the rays as well as the kingdoms in nature and the forms contained therein. It determines the activity of God Himself. Races incarnate, disappear and reincarnate, and so do all lives in form. Reincarnation or cyclic activity lies behind all phenomenal activity and appearance. It is an aspect of the pulsating life of deity. It is the breathing out and the breathing in of the process of divine existence and manifestation. It is that which lies behind the science of chemical affinity, of the relation of the polar opposites, and of the marriage relation, whether that of men and women or of the soul and its expression, the personality. It is the cause of the sex relation in the world, which works under the great law of attraction and repulsion. Perhaps as we are considering the work of one kingdom with another and the relation between positive and negative groups of lives, such as that of the fourth kingdom in nature to the third, it might be apposite next to deal briefly with this subject of sex, which is to be so deeply and widely considered, and more wisely understood, through the influence of the incoming seventh ray. I have little more to add to this teaching anent the animal kingdom and the rays, for, as said before, it profits not. Man's work is to raise the dead to life, to bring brotherhood into expression on the physical plane, and to transmit divine energy to a waiting world of forms. As the rays play their part with humanity and bring man forth into manifestation as he is in essence and reality, his work with the animal kingdom and with the other kingdoms will proceed steadily and inevitably. Scarcely knowing how or why, humanity will play its part in the work of building. The creative work will proceed and the plan materialize. Man's work for the animal kingdom is to stimulate instinct until individualization is possible. His work for the vegetable kingdom is to foster the perfume-producing faculty, and to adapt plant life to the myriad uses of man and of animals. Man's work with the mineral kingdom is to work alchemically and magically. With that process of transmutation and of subsequent revelation I cannot here deal. The problem of sex. I have stated that the incoming seventh ray plays through the planetary sacral center, and then through the sacral center of every human being. Because of this, we can look for the anticipated developments in that human function which we designate the sex function. We shall see consequent changes in the attitude of man towards this most difficult problem. In speaking on the subject of sex, and in outlining what it is possible to say at this time, I seek to be as simple as I can, and to express my thoughts in such a way that something constructive may eventuate, and a note may be struck which will sound forth clearly in the present welter of discordant sounds, of conflicting views, and of varying ideas. It is obvious that the matter is a difficult one to approach. So why is it so difficult? In the last analysis, we shall find that the difficulty is based on the prejudices in men's minds, and upon their inner assurance that their particular point of view is necessarily the right one because they themselves live and act in accordance with it, and it suffices for them. It is based on the fact that sex is one of the fundamental primeval urges, one of the substantial instincts, and is consequently the dominating factor in the animal side of man's nature. It is based upon the excessive intimacy of the subject, an intimacy which was transmuted into an indecent secret during the periods wherein the race succumbed to an excessive puritanism and prostituted a natural function into a prurient mystery. This intimacy relating to the subject of sex caused it to be regarded as an unmentionable episode, and as a topic to be shunned by decent people, instead of being regarded as an instinctual and natural process, as instinctual and as necessary as the functions of eating and drinking. It is a function, however, which has not been reduced to rhythm in the daily life and regarded as one to be followed and satisfied only when need arises and right demands. Herein lies a great distinction, and a clue is offered to the problem. Again, the difficulty of the problem can be found in the widely diverse attitudes of men's minds to the subject. These attitudes range all the way from an ill-regulated promiscuity to a monogamy which has worked out into a cruel imposition and restraint upon women, and an unbridled license on the part of men. Attendant upon these difficulties, and growing out of these wrong attitudes, the legalities and the illegalities, the license and the restraints, have produced points of infection, if I may so call them, in our civilization. Because of them, we find a lax morality which is based on bewilderment, red light, districts which are but an unhappy compromise with vicious tendencies and unsatisfied desires, divorce courts which devastate the life of the family and in time undermine the national life, of which each family unit should be a wholesome part, and the steady growth of disease as the result of the prevalent promiscuity and the many illicit relations. There is also a psychological factor to be found, of real importance. This fact is the militancy expressed by the many groups of people who are seeking to impose their own ideas and their peculiar solution of the problem upon their fellowmen. Behind all these results of an age-long wrong attitude to the sex function lie two major evils, or rather two major effects of man's actions, mental and physical. These are of dire significance. There is, first of all, the development within man's consciousness of those complexes, those psychoses and psychological disruptions and inhibitions, which have so seriously undermined the health and the serenity of hundreds and thousands of men. There is, secondly, the threatening of the very life of humanity itself, as it is embodied in the family unit and family life. On the one hand, you have promiscuity and overindulgence in sex relations, which are resulting, and have always resulted, in overpopulation and an overproduction of human beings. On the other hand, you have an enforced sterility which, though in many ways the lesser of the two evils, is eventually dangerous. This sterility is rapidly on the increase. It leads finally to physical conditions which are undesirable. Nevertheless, at this time, it is the lesser of the two evils. 2 points might incidentally be noted here. Out of the first of these evils, and as a result of overproduction, we have brought about an economic situation of such a drastic and serious nature that the very peace and stability of the world are threatened. Out of the second, we should have a gradual disappearance of humanity itself, if enforced sterility should become a universal practice. This would lead to the consequent dominance of the animal world and an immense increase of animal life, and we should have a period of retrogression and not of progress. In dealing with this subject of sex I shall have to generalize, and the exceptions to the rules laid down and to the suggested classifications will, of course, be many. I am dealing with the subject as a whole, and my topic therefore is the menace of the present attitude, the need for a fuller understanding, and the importance of a rearrangement of men's ideas on this vital matter. The attitude of the unthinking savage to the sex life, and the attitude of the mentally polarized and spiritually oriented initiate to the same subject, may seem so widely dissimilar that on the surface there may appear no point of resemblance, yet basically both of these attitudes are nearer to each other and to the reality than is that of the average man today. The one is controlled by the rhythm of his animal nature, and knows no more of the evil side and of the vile promiscuity of the civilized man than does the animal in its wild state. The other lives his life in a controlled fashion, governing through the power of the mind, and animated by desire for the good of humanity. In between these two approaching extremes, we have the many points of view, the many dissimilar ideas, the many customs, the many types of relation, legitimate and illegitimate, the many animal and psychological reactions, the many forms of marriage, and the many perversions of a natural process which distinguish modern man in all parts of the world. These again vary in the different civilizations and under the influence of the differing climatic conditions. It is therefore obvious, is it not, that it is no part of my service to the readers of this book to enter into a detailed analysis of the marriage customs of the ages, past and present. It is not my work to enlarge in detail upon the mistakes, the evil consequences, the many types of perversion, and the sadistic cruelties which have grown out of man's misuse of the natural processes and of his mate, nor to elucidate his foolish misunderstanding of the law of attraction and repulsion. It would serve no useful purpose if I put forth, in this brief discussion of an immense subject, any of the theories which men have formulated in their search for a solution. Their name is legion. All have in them a measure of the truth. Most of them express the depths of man's ignorance, and they can be studied at any time by any student who has the time to read, the intelligence to see clearly and without prejudice, and the money to purchase the needed literature. I cannot and I will not touch upon the medical and physiological aspect of vice, whether it be the vice of promiscuity or the vice of an unhappy marriage. I can best serve you at this time by pointing out the laws which should govern the life of man, particularly where sex is concerned, and by indicating, as far as I can and dare, why and how the present peculiar and unique conditions have been brought about. I may also be able to make certain suggestions which, when duly considered, may help to clear from the mind those false and illusory views which prevent man from seeing truly, and I may thus help him to find the golden thread of light which will lead him to his solution in due time. One thing I will say, sad though it may seem to you to be. There is no immediate solution of the problem of sex with which we are at this time confronted. For ages men have misused and wrongly employed a God-given function. They have prostituted their birthright, and through their laxity and license, and through their lack of control, they have inaugurated an era of disease, both mental and physical, of wrong attitudes and illusory relations which it will take several centuries to eradicate. They have also brought too rapidly into incarnation myriads of human beings who were not yet ready for the experience of this incarnation, and who needed longer interludes between births wherein to assimilate experience. Those souls who are unevolved come into incarnation with rapidity, but older souls need longer periods wherein to garner the fruits of experience. They are however open to the magnetic attractive power of those who are alive on the physical plane, and it is these souls who can be brought prematurely into incarnation. The process is under law, but the unevolved progress under group law is due the animals, whilst the more evolved are susceptible to the pull of human units, and the evolved come into incarnation. Under the law of service, and through the deliberate choice of their conscious souls. I shall divide what I have to say into 4 parts, for the sake of clarity and rapid reference. 1. Definitions of sex, of virtue and of vice. 2. Sex in the New Age. 3. Some suggestions for the present moment. 4. Sex and the life of discipleship. I deal not with history nor with the details of racial evolution. These are necessarily all connected with the problem of sex, but are too vast in their implications for my present purposes. As I said before, I deal not with the physiological aspects of sex, nor with the diseases incident upon the misuse of the function, nor shall I deal with the subject of sterility, except as it enters into our consideration of modern man. I cannot touch upon the quarrels of the various schools of thought, for I am not writing from any specific angle, such as that of religion or of morality or of partisanship. The whole question is wider and bigger than any religious view or the moral affirmations of the little minds. What is morality in one country or in one specific relation can be quite the reverse in another. What is deemed legal in one part of the world is found illegal in another. What constitutes a difficult problem under one climatic condition presents totally different possibilities under another. Polygamy, promiscuity and monogamy have been and are cyclically dominant in different parts of the world, down through the ages, and are to be found functioning simultaneously on the earth today. Each has been, or is, in turn right, legal and suitable, or wrong, illegal and unsuitable. Each of these forms of interpreting the sex relation has been the subject of attack or defense, of virtuous horror or of specious argument. Each has been the common custom and the rightful method, according to the location, the tradition, training and attitude of the men who practiced it. In one part of the world, one woman may have many husbands, in another, one husband is legally entitled to 4 wives, if so he choose, and in the harem and the kraal such conditions are always to be found. In the West, a man has legally one wife, but through his promiscuity and his so-called romantic adventures, he really has as many as an African chieftain, and today, women are little better. I have enumerated the above conditions with no thought of criticism in my mind, but simply as a statement of fact, and in order to awaken in the average reader a realization of a worldwide condition which is probably quite different to their ordinary surmise. I write not for the specialists, but for the average intelligent student who needs a worldwide picture of existing conditions. It is divinely true that the trend of men's thoughts and desires is towards an established monogamy, but as yet this has never been universally achieved. If one faces this issue with courage and with truth, one will be forced to the conclusion that down the ages men have never been monogamists. Women have been more so in the past than men, but are perhaps less so now, as modern knowledge is inculcating modern methods of protection from the risk and pain of childbirth. Up till now, the act of bearing children has been regarded as deterrent and as a penalty for legal or illegal sex relations. Think of the horror unfolded in those words. Women, practicing the ancient trade of promiscuity, have of course always existed, but I am referring here to women in the home. Will you believe me if I tell you that the world situation today where sex is concerned, is so critical and so serious that there is not a thinker to be found who can yet see the solution, or who can find, no matter how clear his brain or erudite his mind, the way out of the present impasse. The traditions of customs and of practices, with their inevitable consequences and long-established tenure, serve to bewilder the clearest minds. The physical results alone of sexual intercourse, carried on within or without the legalized marriage relation, have produced not only the world of everyday human life, but much of the disease, the insanity, the evil tendencies, and the perverted impulses which today fill our hospitals, our homes for neurotics, our sanatoriums, our prisons and our lunatic asylums. Our young people, especially the idealistic types and the clear-thinking boys and girls, find themselves faced with a situation which defies their best efforts. They do not know what to think or what to believe. They look into, or form part of, homes which are sanctified by legal marriage, and find, on a large scale, nothing but unhappiness, legalized prostitution, ill health, the seeking of illicit relations outside the home, neglected and unwanted children, the friction produced by wrong mating, divorce, and no answer to their many intelligent questions. They look then elsewhere, into the lives of those who have avoided the responsibility of marriage, and find naught but discontent, frequently a secret and hidden sex life, ill health as a result of the frustration of the natural instincts, psychological conditions of the worst kind, sometimes illegitimate children, sexual perversions, and a growing tendency towards what is called homosexuality. They are overwhelmed by complete bewilderment and the failure to find an answer to their questions. They ask the worldly minded for a solution and for help, and get no clear reply, no sound philosophy and no fundamental instruction. They may be offered sound common sense, and the injunction to avoid excesses and those conditions which would impair their health or lay on them the burden of straitened economic conditions. The moralities of the past may be pointed out to them, and they may be warned of the results which inevitably follow when the laws of nature are broken and the physical body is prostituted to ill-regulated desire. They may have the virtues of straight living eulogized to them, and even the fact that they are sons of God may be emphasized to them. All this is good and right and useful. But no true solution is offered, and no light is thrown upon their problem, and their confusion remains unrelieved. They may perhaps turn to the religiously minded people and seek out the Orthodox churchmen. They may be told to be good, the example of the saints may be cited to them, they may find themselves deluged in a flood of puritanical injunctions, in righteous platitudes, and with unsatisfying explanations, based often on personal prejudice and predilection. But seldom is a clear note sounded, and seldom is it possible to do more than enunciate the great Mosaic law, "Thou shalt not." To the bulk of the young and seeking inquirers of the present generation the fact that God says thus and so, or the Bible ordains this, that or the other, does not satisfy their longing to know the reason why. The hope of an ultimate heaven, where self-discipline, self-control and sexual abstinence will receive a just reward, seems too far away to offset the temptations of the outer environing world and the insistent urges arising within the man himself. That many do withstand the temptations of the flesh is indeed wonderfully true. That there are men and women everywhere who pass through life clean and uncontaminated is equally and wonderfully a fact. That there are advanced souls whose life is divorced from the animal nature and whose minds control their daily acts is the glory of humanity. But many of them, living in another world of thought and interest, are not tempted as are the more animally inclined of the sons of men. There are, again, of course, those who refrain from wrongdoing because they fear the results, either today in the physical body or hereafter in the other world of penalty. But which of all these people, even the most good and saintly, can speak with real wisdom and understanding of this universal problem? Which of them can see the way out for humanity at present? Which of them understands the reason for all the distress, sin and wickedness which have grown up around the sex relation? Which of them really comprehends the true significance of the sex life, its place in the great scheme of things, and the reason for the relation between the sexes? Which of them can say with true vision what the next evolutionary step will be, whither we are going, and what will be the next development? 1. Definitions of sex, of virtue and of vice. Cosmically speaking, sex is a short word used to express the relation existing, during manifestation, between spirit and matter, and between life and form. It is, in the last analysis, an expression of the law of attraction, that basic law which underlies the entire manifestation of life in form, and which is the cause of all phenomenal appearance. Humanly or physically speaking, sex is the word used to denote the relation between men and women which results in the reproduction of the species. Speaking in terms of modern usage as it is found among the unthinking and the average, sex is a word which denotes the alluring satisfaction of the animal impulses at any cost and with no rhythmic regulation. Sex is essentially an expression of duality, and of the separation of a unity into two aspects or halves. These we can call spirit and matter, male and female, positive and negative, and they are in the nature of a stage upon the evolutionary ladder towards a final unity or homosexuality which has no relation to that perversion which is, today and inaccurately, called homosexuality. This latter manifestation is rampant at this time in a mental and modern conception of the phenomenon, but it is rare indeed to find a person who truly combines within himself the two sexes, and is, physiologically and mentally, entirely self-satisfying, self-sustaining and self-propagating. Down the ages, here and there, we find the true homosexual emerging as a guarantee of a distant racial and evolutionary achievement, when the world cycle will have been run and the two separated halves will again be merged in their essential unity. In the above phraseology I do not refer to any doctrine of twin souls, or to any perversion of reality, as ordinarily understood today. I refer to the divine hermaphrodite, to the true androgynous man, and to the perfected human being. But the word has been distorted from its true significance and applies in 9 cases out of 10, nay, in 99 cases out of 100, to a type of mental perversion, to a distorted attitude of mind which results often in physical practices and reactions which are, in their manifestation, so old that their very antiquity gives the lie to the idea that this attitude marks a step forward on the path of progress. It marks indeed a point of retrogression, the swinging back into an ancient rhythm, and the resumption of ancient practices. These perversions are ever found when a civilization is crumbling and the old order is changing into a new. Why should this be? It is due to the fact that the newer impulses pouring into the old, and the impact of the new forces upon humanity, awaken in man a desire for that which is, for him, a new and untried field of expression, and for that which is unusual and oft abnormal. Weak minds then succumb to the impulse, or strong experimenting souls fall victim to their own lower natures, and investigate in unlawful directions. You have, then, under these new energies, a definite progress forward into new and untried spiritual realms, but at the same time, you find an experimenting in the realm of physical desire which is not for humanity the line of progress. As the world of forms responds cyclically to the inflow of the higher energies, their effect is to stimulate all parts and aspects of the form life, and this stimulation will produce results that are bad as well as good. Evil will temporarily emerge as well as lasting righteousness. If the effect of the impact of these energies is to produce material reactions, and if man then lays the emphasis of his interest upon that which is material, then the form nature becomes dominant, and not the divine. If energy is prostituted to material ends, such as the expression of physical plane sexual relations for purely commercial objectives, then evil is the result. But it must be remembered that the same divine energy, when working in the realm of brotherly love, for instance, would produce naught but good. Let me illustrate my point in two ways, both of which account for the present orgy of sexual expression and for the widespread interest in the subject. We live today in a period of the world's history wherein three events of major importance are taking place, mostly unrealized and unobserved by the majority of people. The seventh ray of law and order is coming into manifestation. We are transiting into a new sign of the zodiac, and the coming of Christ is imminent. These three great happenings are the cause of much of the present upheaval and chaos. At the same time they are responsible for the universal turning to spiritual realities which all true workers at this time recognize, and for the growth of understanding, of welfare movements and of the tendency to cooperation, of religious unity and of internationalism. Types of energy which have hitherto been latent are now becoming potent. The consequent world reaction is, in the initial stages, material in its manifestation. In its final stages, divine qualities will manifest and change history and civilization. The interest being shown today in the so-called cosmic rays indicates a scientific recognition of the new incoming seventh-ray energies. These rays, pouring through the sacral center of the planetary etheric body, have necessarily an effect upon the sacral centers of humanity, and hence the sex life of mankind is temporarily overstimulated, and hence also the present overemphasis upon sex. But hence also, and this must be remembered, the keen impetus now being mentally expressed which will eventually result in man's thinking through to a solution of this problem of sex. The coming in of the Aquarian age also stimulates in man a spirit of universality and a tendency towards fusion. This can be seen working out in the present trend towards synthesis in business, in religion and in politics. It produces an urge towards union, and among other unions, towards religious understanding and tolerance. But these influences, playing upon the sensitive bodies of the undeveloped and the over-psychic, lead to a morbid tendency towards unions, legitimate and illegitimate. They produce an extreme aptitude to sexual intercourse in many directions, and to relations and fusions which are not along the intended or the evolutionary line, and which outrage off the very laws of nature itself. Energy is an impersonal thing, and is dual in its effect, the effect varying according to the type of substance upon which it plays. The incoming seventh ray expresses the power to organize, the ability to integrate and to bring into synthetic relation the great pairs of opposites, and thus produce the new forms of spiritual manifestation. But it will also produce the new forms of what, from the standpoint of spirit, may be regarded as material evil. It is the great impulse which will bring into the light of day all that is to be found clothed with matter, and will thus eventually lead to the revelation of spirit and of the hidden glory, when that which has been revealed of the material form has been purified and sanctified. This it was to which Christ referred when he prophesied that, at the end of the age, the hidden things would be made plain, and secrets be shouted from the housetops. By means of this process of revelation, within the human family as well as elsewhere in nature, we shall have the development of the power of thought. This will come about through the development of the faculty of discrimination, which will offer choices to man, and thus develop a truer sense of values. False and true standards will emerge in man's consciousness, and those choices will be made which will lay the foundation of the new order, which will inaugurate the new race, with its new laws and novel approaches, and so usher in the new religion of love and brotherhood, and that period wherein the group and group good will be the dominant note. Then separateness and hatreds will fade out and men will be merged in a true unity. The third factor under consideration, the coming of the Christ as it is called, must also be noted. Everywhere we find the spirit of expectancy, and the demand for a manifestation and a symbolic happening which we call by various names but which is usually referred to as the advent of Christ. This, as you know, may be an actual physical coming, as before in Palestine, or it may connote a definite overshadowing of his disciples and lovers by the great Lord of life. This overshadowing will call forth a response from all those who are in any way spiritually awakened. Or again, the coming may take the form of a tremendous inflow of the Christ principle, the Christ life and love, working out through the human family. Perhaps all three possibilities may be found simultaneously on our planet very shortly. It is not for us to say. It is for us to be ready, and for us to work at preparing the world for that significant series of events. The immediate future will show. The point I seek to make, however, is that this inflow of the Christ spirit of love, whether it comes through a person in bodily form or through his felt and realized presence, will again be twofold in its effect. This is a hard saying for the unthinking and the illogical. Both the good and the evil man will be stimulated. Both material desire and spiritual aspiration will be awakened and fostered. Facts prove the truth of the saying that a heavily fertilized garden and a carefully tended and watered plot of ground will produce its crop of weeds as well as flowers. Yet in this fact you have two reactions to the same sun, the same water, the same fertilizing agency and the same care. The difference exists in the seeds found in the ground upon which these factors play. The inflow of love therefore will stimulate earthly love and earthly desire and animal lust. It will foster the urge to possess in the material sense, with all the evil consequent upon this attitude, and the resulting growth of sexual reactions, and the many expressions of an ill-regulated mechanism, responding to an impersonal force. But it will also produce the growth of brotherly love and foster the development and the expression of group consciousness, of universal understanding. It will produce a new and powerful tendency to fusion, to at-one-ment and to synthesis. All this will be brought about through the medium of humanity and the Christ spirit. Steadily the love of Christ will be shed abroad in the earth, and its influence will grow stronger during the coming centuries, until at the end of the Aquarian Age, and through the work of the seventh ray, bringing the pairs of opposites into closer cooperation, we can look for the raising of Lazarus from the dead, and the emergence of humanity out of the tomb of matter. The hidden divinity will be revealed. Steadily all forms will be brought under the influence of the Christ spirit, and the consummation of love will be brought about. Owing to these three causes we have at this time a worldwide interest in sex, leading as a natural consequence to two things. First, to an outburst throughout the entire world, and primarily in our large centers of population, of an increase in sexual relations, but distinguished at this time by no corresponding increase in population. This is due to the modern understanding of birth control methods and secondly to the increased mental focusing or polarization of the race, which leads to sterility or to a reduction in the size of the families raised. Second, to a reorganization of the racial ideas on marriage and on sexual relations. This is due to the breakdown of our present economic situation, to the widespread interest in medical hygiene. An interest hitherto confined to the specialists, to the general recognition of the varied marriage customs of the nations in the East and in the West, which has led to a general questioning, and also to the failure of the legal machine to safeguard the family unit and to interpret human relations in a satisfactory manner. Out of this universal interest and discussion we shall work towards a solution and an objective which exist as yet on purely abstract mental levels and in the world of ideas. Even the foremost thinkers of the race sense only vaguely and nebulously what these hidden ideals may be. The question at issue is not primarily a religious one, except in so far as social relations are basically divine relations. It is fundamental in its connotation, and when it is solved we shall see the establishment of equality between the sexes, the removal of those barriers which at present exist between men and women, and the safeguarding of the family unit. This will involve therefore the protection of the child, so that he may be given those essentials to right physical growth and that true education which will lead to emotional unfoldment along sound lines, and a mental development which will enable him to serve his race, his time and his group to the best possible advantage. This has always been an ideal, but it has never yet been satisfactorily accomplished. The solving of the sexual problem will release the minds of men from an inhibition and an undue concern, and so produce a mental freedom which will admit of the inflow of new ideas and concepts. We shall discover that vice and virtue have no real reference to ability and inability to conform to man-made laws, but to man's attitude to himself and to his social relation with God and his fellowmen. Virtue is the manifestation in man of the spirit of cooperation with his brothers, necessitating unselfishness, understanding and complete self-forgetfulness. Vice is the negation of this attitude. These two words signify in reality simply perfection and imperfection, conformity to a divine standard of brotherhood or a failure to achieve that standard. Standards are shifting things and change with man's growth towards divinity. They vary also according to man's destiny as it is affected by his time and age, his nature and surroundings. They alter also according to the point of evolutionary development. The standard for attainment is not today what it was 1,000 years ago, nor 1,000 years hence will it be what it is today. Yet all periods of the world's history have not been as critical as today, for, apart from the great cyclic opportunity to which I have earlier referred, we have in humanity itself a unique attainment. For the first time in racial history, we have the expression of a true human being, of man as he essentially is. We have the personality, integrated and functioning as a unit, and we have the mind and the emotional nature fused and blended, on the one hand with the physical body, and on the other with the soul. Also, the shift of emphasis is today away from the physical life to the mental life, and in an increasing number of cases to the spiritual life. There is therefore little real cause for depression, if what I have here noted is true. There is today, on a wide scale, a true lifting up of the heart unto the Lord, and a steady turning of the eyes towards the world of spiritual values. Hence the present upheaval. Apart from the coming in of the New Age, apart therefore from the inflow of the Christ Spirit, with its transforming power and regenerating force, and apart from the cyclic return of the seventh-ray energies, we have mankind in a condition where the response to the deeper spiritual energies and to the new opportunities is, for the first time, adequate and synthetic. Hence the increasing problem. Hence the great day of opportunity. Hence the wonder of the dawn which can be seen brightening in the east. I should like here to approach the problem of sex from another angle and point out that it is a basic symbol. A symbol, as we well know, is an outward and visible sign of an inward and spiritual reality. What is this inward reality? First of all, the reality of relationship. It is a relationship existing between the basic pairs of opposites, father-mother, spirit-matter, between positive and negative, between life and form, and between the great dualities which, when brought together in the cosmic sense, produce the manifested Son of God, the cosmic Christ, the conscious sentient universe. Of this relation the Gospel story is a dramatic symbol, and the historical Christ is the guarantee of its truth and reality. Christ guarantees for us the reality of the inner significance and the true spiritual basis of all that is and ever shall be. Out of the relation of light and dark that which is invisible emerges into visibility, and we can see and know. Christ, as the light of the world, revealed that reality. Out of the darkness of time God spoke, and the fatherhood of deity was revealed. The drama of creation and the story of revelation are depicted for us, if we could but see truly and interpret our facts with spiritual exactitude, in the relation of the two sexes and in the fact of their intercourse with each other. When this relation is no longer purely physical but is a union of the two separated halves on all three planes, physical, emotional and mental, then we shall see the solution of the sex problem and the restitution of the marriage relation to its intended position in the mind of God. Today it is the marriage of two physical bodies. Sometimes it is the marriage also of the emotional natures of the two people concerned. Rarely indeed is it a marriage of minds as well. Sometimes it is the union of the physical body of one party, with the physical body of the other party left cold and uninterested and uninvolved, but with the emotional body attracted and participating. Sometimes the mental body is involved with the physical body, and the emotional nature left out. Seldom, very seldom, do we find the coordinated, cooperating fusion of all the three parts of the personality concerned in both parties to the union. When this is indeed found, then you have a true union, a real marriage, and a blending of the two in one. It is here that some of the schools of esoteric teaching have gone sadly astray. The false idea has crept into their presentation of truth that marriage of this kind is essential for spiritual liberation and that without it the soul remains in prison. They teach that through the marriage act, at one ment with the soul is brought about, and that there is no spiritual deliverance without this marriage. At one ment with the soul is an individual interior experience, resulting in an expansion of consciousness, so that the individual and specific becomes at one with the general and universal. Behind the erroneous interpretation, however, lies truth. Where this true marriage and these ideal sexual relations on all three planes are found, the right conditions exist in which souls can be provided with the needed forms in which to incarnate. Sons of God can find forms in which to manifest on earth. According to the scope of the marriage contact, if so unusual a form of words can be used in this connection, so will be the type of human being attracted into incarnation. Where the parents are purely physical and emotional, so will be the nature of the child. Thus is the general average determined. Today we have a world of men which is rapidly reaching a high stage of development. We have therefore a dissatisfaction with the present views on marriage, preparatory to the enunciation of certain hidden principles which will eventually govern the relations between the sexes, and provide, as a consequence, the opportunity to men and women to furnish, through the creative act, the needed bodies for disciples and initiates. Under the symbol of sex, you have also the reality of love itself expressing itself. Love in reality connotes a relation, but the word love, like the word sex, is used with little thought and with no attention to its true meaning. Basically, love and sex are one and the same thing, for both express the meaning of the law of attraction. Love is sex, and sex is love, for in those two words the relation, the interplay and the union between God and his universe, between man and God, between a man and his own soul, and between men and women are equally depicted. The motive and the relation are emphasized. But the impelling result of that relation is creation and the manifestation of form through which divinity can express itself and come to be. Spirit and matter met together, and the manifested universe came into being. Love is ever productive, and the law of attraction is fruitful in results. Man and God came together under the same great law, and the Christ was born, the guarantee of the divinity of humanity and the demonstration of the fact. Individual man and his soul are also attempting to come together, and when that event is consummated the Christ is born in the cave of the heart, and Christ is seen in the daily life with increasing power. Man therefore dies daily in order that Christ may be seen in all his glory. Of all these wonders, sex is the symbol. Again, in man himself the great drama of sex is enacted, and twice over in his body, within his personality, the process of union and fusion takes place. Let me briefly refer here to these two symbolic happenings, for the use of esoteric students, so that the great story of sex may be comprehended in its spiritual sense. Man, as you know, is the expression of energies. These energies galvanize the physical man into activity through the medium of certain force centers in the etheric body. These, for our immediate purposes, can be divided into 3 centers below the diaphragm and 4 above. These are: I below the diaphragm. 1. The base of the spine. 2. The sacral center. 3. The solar plexus. 2. Above the diaphragm. 1. The heart center. 2. The throat center. 3. The center between the eyebrows. 4. The head center. We know that 2 fusions have to take place and, in these 2 we have 2 enactments of the symbolic sex process, and 2 symbolic events that externalize a spiritual happening and picture forth to man his spiritual goal and God's great objective in the evolutionary process. First, the energies below the diaphragm have to be lifted up and blended with those above the diaphragm. With the process and rules for so doing we cannot here deal, except in one case, the raising of the sacral energy to the throat center, or the transmutation of the process of physical reproduction and of physical creation into that of the creativeness of the artist in some field of creative expression. Through the union of the energies of these two centers we shall come to that stage in our development wherein we shall produce the children of our skill and minds. Where, in other words, there is a true union of the higher and the lower energies, you will have the emergence of beauty in form, the enshrining of some aspect of truth in appropriate expression, and thus the enriching of the world. Where there is this synthesis, the true creative artist begins to function. The throat, the organ of the word, expresses the life and manifests the glory and the reality behind. Such is the symbolism lying behind the teaching of the fusion of the lower energies with the higher, and of this, physical plane sex as a symbol. Mankind today is rapidly becoming more creative, for the transfusion of the energies is going on under the new impulses. As we develop the sense of purity in man, as the growth of the sense of responsibility is fostered, and as his love of beauty, of color and of ideas proceeds, we shall have a rapid increase in the raising of the lower into union with the higher, and thereby the beautifying of the temple of the Lord will be tremendously accelerated. In the coming Aquarian age this will go rapidly forward. The majority of people today live below the diaphragm, and their energies are turned outward into the material world and prostituted to material ends. In the coming centuries this will be corrected, their energies will be transmuted and purified, and men will begin to live above the diaphragm. They will then express the potencies of the loving heart, of the creative throat, and of the divinely ordered will of the head. Of this relation between the lower and the higher, physical plane sex is the symbol. But in the head of man himself is also to be found a marvelous symbolic happening. In that living organism is enacted that drama whereby the purely human being merges himself in divinity. The great final drama of the mystical union between God and man, and between the soul and the personality is there enacted. According to the Eastern philosophy, there are in the head of man two great energy centers. One of them, the center between the eyebrows, blends and fuses the 5 types of energy which are transmitted to it and blended with it, the energy of the 3 centers below the diaphragm and of the throat and heart centers. The other, the head center, is awakened through meditation, service and aspiration, and it is through this center that the soul makes its contact with the personality. This head center is the symbol of the spirit or positive masculine aspect, just as the center between the eyebrows is the symbol of matter, of the negative feminine aspect. Connected with these force vortices are 2 physical plane organs, the pituitary body and the pineal gland. The first is negative and the second is positive. These 2 organs are the higher correspondences of the male and female organs of physical reproduction. As the soul becomes increasingly potent in the mental and emotional life of the aspirant, it pours in with greater power into the head center. As the man works with his personality, purifying it and bending it to the service of the spiritual will, he automatically raises the energies of the centers in the body up to the center between the eyebrows. Eventually the influence of each of the 2 centers increases and becomes wider and wider, until they make a contact with each other's vibratory or magnetic field, and instantly the light flashes out. Father Spirit and Mother Matter unite and are at one and the Christ is born. Except a man be born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God, said the Christ. This is the second birth, and from that moment vision comes with increasing power. This is again the great drama of sex, reenacted in man. Thus in his personal life he 3 times knows the meaning of union, of sex. 1. In the physical plane sex, or his relation to his opposite, the woman, resulting in the reproduction of the species. 2. In the union of the lower energies with the higher, resulting in the creative work. 3. In the union within the head of the energies of the personality with those of the soul, resulting in the birth of the Christ. Great is the glory of man and wonderful are the divine functions which he embodies. Through the passage of time, the race has been brought to the point where man is beginning to raise the lower energies into the higher centers, and it is this transition which is causing much of the trouble in the world today. Many men everywhere are becoming politically, religiously, scientifically, or artistically creative, and the impact of their mental energy and of their plans and ideas is making itself felt competitively. Until the idea of brotherhood dominates the race, we shall see these powers prostituted to personal ends and ambitions, and to consequent disaster, just as we have seen the power of sex prostituted to personal satisfaction and selfishness and consequent disaster. Some few, however, are raising their energies higher still and translating them into terms of the heavenly world. The Christ is being born today in many a human being, and increasingly will the sons of God appear in their true nature to take over the guidance of humanity in the new age. 2. Sex in the New Age. Prophecy is ever a dangerous thing, but a forecast, a drawing out of present general tendencies, is often possible. During the next 200 years the old influences under which we have been living will gradually die out, and the new potencies will make their presence felt. 3 things we are told will characterize the coming Aquarian age, and they will be made possible through the influence of the 3 planets governing the 3 decanates of this sign. First, we shall have the activity of Saturn, producing a dividing of the ways and a proffering of opportunity to those who can avail themselves of it. We shall have, therefore, a period of discipline and a cycle wherein choices will be made, and through these discriminating decisions humanity will enter into its birthright. This influence is now being strongly felt. Then, later, we shall have, through the influence of Mercury in the 2nd decanate, the pouring in of light, of mental and spiritual illumination, and a truer interpretation of the teaching of the Lodge of Messengers. The work of the 1st decanate will enable many to make those choices and efforts which will enable them to raise the lower energies into the higher centers, and to transfer the focus of their attention from below to above the diaphragm. The work of the 2nd decanate will enable those who are thus ready to fuse the personality and the soul, and thus, as I earlier pointed out, the light will shine forth and Christ will be born within them. During the 3rd decanate we shall see the rule of brotherhood inaugurated, and Venus controlling by intelligent love. The group and not the individual will be the important unit, and unselfishness and cooperation will steadily take the place of separativeness and competition. In no department of life will these coming great changes show more potently than in the attitude of man towards sex, and in the readjustment of the marriage relationship. This new attitude will gradually come about as the slowly developing science of psychology comes into its own. As man comes to understand his own threefold nature, and as the nature of consciousness and the depth of his own subconscious life are more truly grasped, there will take place, gradually and automatically, a change in the attitude of men towards women and of women towards their destiny. This needed change will not be the result of legal measures, or of decisions by the people's representatives to meet the disasters of the hour. These changes will come slowly, as the result of the intelligent interest of the next 3 generations. The young people now coming into incarnation, and those who will come during the next century, will prove themselves well equipped to handle this problem of sex, because they can see more clearly than the older generation, and will think in wider and larger terms than is common today. They will be more group-conscious and less individualistic and selfish. They will be more interested in new ideas than in the ancient theologies, and will be freer from prejudice and less intolerant than are the bulk of the well-meaning people of today. Psychology is only just come into its own, and only now is its function beginning to be understood. In 100 years' time, however, it will be the dominating science, and the newer educational systems, based on scientific psychology, will have completely superseded our modern methods. The emphasis in the future will be laid upon the determining of a man's life purpose. This will be brought about through an understanding of his ray, through an analysis of his equipment, and of this, vocational psychology as the faint first beginning, through a study of his horoscope, and through giving him a sound grounding in mind control, as well as training his memory to the impartation of information. The processes by which he can integrate his personality and raise and purify his living qualities will receive careful attention, and all to the end of making him group-conscious and useful to his group. This is the factor of importance. Synthesis, physical purity, decentralization and group good will be the keynotes of the teaching imparted. emotional control and right thinking will be inculcated, and where these are present a knowledge of spiritual realities will be automatically acquired and the life subordinated to the group purpose. Man's relations to others will then be intelligently directed, and his relation to the other sex will be guided not only by love and desire, but by an ordered intellectual appreciation of the true significance of marriage. The above applies to the intelligent, well-intentioned majority whose standards will have developed as the decades pass, so that they will embody the dreams and ideals of the most advanced visionaries of today. The unthinking, the idle and the stupid will still be found, but evolution proceeds apace and order is on its way. What laws will be enacted for the control of the people on this difficult subject of sex I cannot say. What the marriage laws will be it is no part of my purpose to foretell. How the legislatures of the nations will deal with the problem remains to be seen. I am not interested in speculation. But I can and I shall put down for you here the basic premises which will underlie the best thought of the future on the subject of sex and marriage. These premises are 3 in number. When they are understood and grasped, and when they are integrated into the thought of the period, forming the basis of all recognized standards and consistent living, then the details as to how and where and when will take care of themselves. 1. The relation of the sexes and their approach to the marriage relation will be regarded as a part of the group life and as serving the group good. This will not be the result of laws regulating marriage, but a result of education in group relations, service and the law of love, as understood practically and not just sentimentally. Men and women will know themselves as cells in a vital organism, and their activities and outlook will be colored by this realization. It will be regarded as a fact in nature and as a product of past evolutionary cycles, and not be looked upon as a theory and a hope, as is the case today. What is best for the group, and what is needed to promote the efficiency of a unit in the group, will be the points considered. Men will increasingly live in the world of thought and understanding, and not so much in the world of ill-regulated desire and of animal instinct. The love of men for women and of women for men will be more truly present than is now the case, for it will not be so purely emotional, and it will be based also on intelligence. As the creative urge is turned upwards from the sacral center to the throat, man will live less potently in his physical sexual urges, and more consistently in his creative expression. His physical plane life will proceed along normal lines, but it is necessary for men to realize that the manner in which man today satisfies his sexual nature is abnormal and unregulated, and that we are on our way to a wise normality. The craving for selfish pleasure and for the satisfaction of an animal urge, which is instinctually right when regulated and devastatingly wrong when prostituted purely to enjoyment, will give place to a mutual decision by both of the parties concerned. The decision will meet a natural need in a right and suitable and regulated manner. Today one party or other is usually sacrificed, either to an undue abstinence or to an unseemly profligacy. 2. The second rule is based upon the point of evolution, and for its right fulfillment necessitates the true integration of the personality. This rule might be expressed as follows. True marriage and right sexual relation should involve the marriage of all 3 aspects of man's nature. There should be a meeting on all 3 levels of consciousness at once, the physical, the emotional and the mental. A man and a woman, to be truly and happily married, must be complements to each other in all the 3 departments of their nature, and there should be a simultaneous union of all 3. How seldom is this the case, and how rare it is to find. There is no need for me to elaborate in this direction, for this truth is obvious and has oft been voiced. Later, but not for a long while yet, we shall see marriages which will be based upon the point of development of the integrated personality, and only those will meet each other in the sacred marriage ritual who have reached the same point in the work of transmuting the lower into the higher centers. A marriage will be regarded as undesirable and the parties ill-mated where one is living the life of the purified personality above the diaphragm, and the other the life of the intelligent animal below the diaphragm. Finally some few will choose their mates from amongst those in whom the Christ has been born again, and who are giving expression to the Christ life. But the time is not yet, except for the rare and the few. 3. The third governing principle will be the desire to provide good and fair and healthy bodies for incoming egos. This is not possible today, under our ill-regulated system of cohabitation. The majority of the children who are born now have come accidentally into being or are not wanted. Some few, of course, are desired, but even in these cases, that desire is usually based on reasons of heredity, property to be passed on, an old name to be perpetuated, an unfulfilled ambition to be satisfied. Yet the day of ordained and desired births is drawing nearer, and when it comes it will make possible the more rapid incarnation of disciples and initiates. Right preparation will take place prior to any fulfillment of the sex urge, and souls will be attracted to their parents by the urgency of those parents' desire, the purity of their motives and the power of their preparatory work. When these three motives are carefully studied, and when men and women mold their physical plane relationship to each other upon their group responsibilities, upon their union with each other on all three planes simultaneously, and upon the offering of opportunity for incoming souls, then we shall indeed see a restoration of the spiritual aspect of marriage. We shall see the coming in of that era when goodwill will be the outstanding characteristic, and wherein selfish purpose and animal instinct will fade into the background. 3. Some suggestions for the present cycle. I have been occupied with indicating a situation which at present exists, and in pointing out an ideal one which lies ahead, but which is not as yet possible. This is valuable, but it leaves a gap in our thought which requires filling. The question now arises which is capable of formulation in the following terms: given the accuracy of my presentation of the present appalling conditions, given the possibility of an ultimate approximation to the presented ideal in a distant future, is it possible at this time to take steps which will eventually lead to the necessary adjustments in the department of sex? It most certainly is, and my answer takes the following form. When certain basic postulates, 4 in number, have been presented and kept before the mind of the public, they will finally lead to such an education of public opinion that the needed activities will follow. But the first step is the education of the public, and their grasp of the 4 essential laws. Any correction of present conditions will come as a growth from within humanity itself, and not as the imposition of a ruling from without. The training of the public consciousness must therefore go steadily forward, and thus we shall lay the foundation for the later changes. I should like here to remind you that the coming 3 generations, in which I include the present one of boys and girls, will bring into incarnation a group of people who will be well equipped to lead humanity out of the present impasse. This fact warrants remembrance, and is often forgotten. There are always those at every epoch in human history who are able to solve the problems which arise, and who are sent in for that very purpose. This sex problem, in the last analysis, is a temporary one, little as you may think it today, and it grows out of a basic mistake, out of the prostitution of man's God-given faculties to selfish physical ends, instead of their consecration to divine purposes. Man has been swept and carried off his feet by his instinctual animal nature, and only a clear and clean mental understanding of the real nature of his problem will be strong enough to carry him forward into the new age and into the world of right motive and right action. Man has to learn and deeply grasp the fact that the main purpose of sex is not the satisfaction of the appetites, but the providing of physical bodies through which life may express itself. He has to understand the nature of the symbolism underlying the sexual relation, and by its means grasp the scope of the spiritual realities. The law of sex is the law of those relations whereby life and form are brought together in order that divine purpose may be seen. This is a fundamental law of creation, and it is true, whether one is dealing with the informing life of a solar system, with the birth of an animal, or with the appearance of a plant from a seed. Sex is the word we use to cover the relation which exists between that energy we call life, and the aggregate of force units through which that energy expresses itself and builds a form. It covers the activity which takes place when the pairs of opposites are brought together, and by means of which they become at one and produce a third reality. That third reality or result bears witness to their relation, and another life in form is seen. You have always, therefore, relation, at one ment and birth. These 3 words deal with the true significance of sex. But man has prostituted the truth, and the real significance has been lost. Sex now means the satisfaction of the male desire for sensuous pleasure, and the assuaging of a physical appetite through the prostitution of the feminine aspect to that desire and appetite. This relation leads to no result as intended, but to a momentary second of satisfaction, and all of it is confined to the animal nature and the physical plane. I am largely generalizing and would remind you that there are exceptions to all generalizations. I should also like to add that no one must here think that I hold the masculine aspect as responsible for our present problem when I say that man uses woman for his pleasure. How can I mean this, when I know that every human being is cyclically either a man or a woman, that the men of today have been women and the women have been men in previous lives? There is no sex, as we understand it, where souls are concerned. It is only in the form life that sex exists. Only in the process of differentiation for the purposes of experimentation does the incarnating spiritual man occupy first a male body and then a feminine, thus rounding out the negative and positive aspects of the form life. All the race is equally guilty, and all must be equally active in the process of creating the correct conditions, and in bringing order out of the present chaos. Therefore, the first postulate which must be laid down, and to which the general public must be educated, is that all souls incarnate and reincarnate under the law of rebirth. Hence each life is not only a recapitulation of life experience, but an assuming of ancient obligations, a recovery of old relations, an opportunity for the paying of old indebtedness, a chance to make restitution and progress, an awakening of deep-seated qualities, the recognition of old friends and enemies, the solution of revolting injustices, and the explanation of that which conditions the man and makes him what he is. Such is the law which is crying now for universal recognition, and which, when understood by thinking people, will do much to solve the problem. Why will this be so? Because when this law is admitted as a governing intellectual principle, all men will tread more carefully the path of life, and will proceed with greater caution to fulfill their family and group obligations. They will know full well that, whatsoever a man soweth, that will he also reap, and that he will reap it here and now, and not in some mystical and mythical heaven or hell. He will have to make his adjustments in the life of every day upon earth, which provides an adequate heaven and a more than adequate hell. The spreading of this doctrine of rebirth, its scientific recognition and proving, is fast going forward, and during the next 10 years it will be the subject of much attention. The second basic postulate was enunciated for us by Christ when he told us to love our neighbor as ourselves. To this we have paid, as yet, but little attention. We have loved ourselves and have sought to love those we like. But to love universally and because our neighbor is a soul as we are, with a nature essentially perfect and an infinite destiny, this has always been regarded as a beautiful dream to be consummated in a future so distant, and in a heaven so far away, that we may well forget it. 2,000 years have gone since the greatest expression of God's love walked on earth and bade us love each other. Yet still we fight and hate and use our powers for selfish ends, our bodies and our appetites for material pleasures, and our efforts at living are, in the mass, primarily directed towards personal selfishness. Have you ever considered what the world would today be if man had listened to the Christ and had sought to obey his command? We should have eliminated much disease, for the diseases originating in the misuse of the sex function underlie a large percentage of our physical ills, and devastate our modern civilization. We should have made war impossible, we should have reduced crime to a minimum, and our modern life would be an exemplification of a manifesting divinity. But this has not been the case, and hence our modern world conditions. But the new law must, and will, be enunciated. This law can be summed up in the words, "Let a man so live that his life is harmless." Then no evil to the group can grow out of his thoughts, his actions or his words. This is not negative harmlessness, but of a difficult and positive activity. If the above practical paraphrase of the words of Christ were universally promulgated and practically applied, we should have order growing out of chaos, group love superseding personal selfishness, religious unity taking the place of fanatical intolerance, and regulated appetites instead of license. The two laws I have proclaimed, and the two postulates I have above enunciated, sound like platitudes. But platitudes are the universal and recognized truths, and a truth is a scientific pronouncement. The molding of the life by these two recognitions, the law of rebirth and the law of love, would save humanity and rebuild our civilization. They are probably too simple to evoke an interested recognition. But the power lying behind them is the power of divinity itself, and their recognition is simply a question of time, for evolution will force the recognition at some distant date. The forming of an earlier recognition lies in the hands of the disciples and thinkers of the present age. The third basic law underlying the solution of our modern problems, including that of sex, grows normally out of the other two laws. It is the law of group life. Our group relations must be seen and acknowledged. Not only must a man fulfill in love his family and national obligations, but he must think in the wider terms of humanity itself, and so bring the law of brotherhood into expression. Brotherhood is a group quality. The young people who are now coming in will come into life equipped with a much deeper sense of the group, and with their group awareness much more fully developed than is now the case. They will solve their problems, including the problem of sex, by asking themselves when situations arise of a difficult nature, will this action of mine tend to the group good? Will the group be hurt or suffer if I do thus and so? Will this benefit the group and produce group progress, group integration, and group unity? Action which fails to measure up to the group requirements will then automatically be discarded. In the deciding of problems, the individual and the unit will slowly learn to subordinate the personal good and the personal pleasure to group conditions and group requirements. You can see, therefore, how the problem of sex will also yield to solution. An understanding of the law of rebirth, a goodwill towards all men, working out as harmlessness, and a desire for group goodwill will gradually become determining factors in the racial consciousness, and our civilization will adjust itself in time to these new conditions. The final postulate which I seek to emphasize is that the keeping of these three laws will lead necessarily to an urgent desire to keep the law of the land in which a particular soul has incarnated. That these man-made laws are inadequate I well know, and it is needless to point this out. They may be, and are, temporary and insufficient to the need. They may fail in their scope and prove inadequate, but they do, in a measure, safeguard the little feeble ones, and will be regarded therefore as binding upon those who are seeking to help the race. These laws are subject to change as the effect of the three great laws makes itself felt, but until they are wisely altered, and this takes time, they act as a brake on license and on selfishness. They may also work hardship. This none can deny. But the hardships they bring are not so evil in their nature nor so lasting in their effects as would be the result of their removal and the consequent inauguration of a cycle of lawlessness. Therefore, the server of the race cooperates with the laws of the land in his daily life, working at the same time for the removal of the injustices they may produce and for the bettering of the legal impositions upon mankind in his country. In the recognition of these four laws, of rebirth, of love, of the group, and of the land, we shall see the salvation of the race. 4. Sex and discipleship. I want to write a word on the subject of sex in the life of the disciple. There is much confusion in the minds of aspirants on this matter, and the injunction as to celibacy is assuming the position of a religious doctrine. We are often told by the well-meaning but illogical that if a man is a disciple he cannot marry, and that there is no real spiritual attainment unless a man is celibate. This theory has its roots in two things. First, there has ever been a mistaken attitude in the East towards women. Secondly, in the West, from the time of Christ, there has been a tendency towards the monastic and conventual conception of spiritual life. These two attitudes embody two mistaken ideas, and lie at the root of much misunderstanding and at the heart of much evil. Man is no better than the woman, nor woman than the man. Yet many thousands regard women as embodying that which is evil and that which is the basis of temptation. But God has from the beginning ordained that men and women should meet each other's needs and act as complements to each other. God has not ordained that men should live herded together, away from women, or women away from men, and both of these great systems have led to much sexual abuse and to much suffering. The belief that to be a disciple necessitates a celibate life and complete abstinence from all natural functions is neither correct nor desirable. This can be proved by the recognition of two things. The first is that if divinity is indeed a reality and an expression of omnipotence and omnipresence as well as omniscience, and if man is essentially divine, then there can be no condition possible wherein divinity cannot be supreme, there can be no sphere of human activity where man cannot act divinely and wherein all functions cannot be illumined by the light of pure reason and divine intelligence. I deal not here with the specious and devious argument that that which normally and by all right-minded people is regarded as wrong must be right because of man's inherent divinity. That can be but a loose excuse for wrongdoing. I speak of sexual relations of the right kind, within the permit of the spiritual law as well as the law of the land. Secondly, a life that is not normally rounded out till all the functions of its nature, animal, human and divine, and man is all of these three in one body, are exercised, is frustrated, inhibited, and abnormal. That all cannot marry in these days is true, but that fact does not negate the greater fact that man has been created by God to marry. That all are not in a position where they can today live normal and full lives is equally a consequence of our present abnormal economic conditions, but this in no way negates the fact that the condition is abnormal. But that an enforced celibacy is an indication of a deep spirituality, and a necessary part of all esoteric and spiritual training, is equally false, abnormal and undesirable. There is no better training school for a disciple and an initiate than family life, with its enforced relations, its scope for adjustments and adaptability, its demanded sacrifices and service, and its opportunities for the full expression of every part of man's nature. There is no greater service to be rendered to the race than the proffering of bodies to incoming souls, and the giving of attention and educational facilities to those souls within the home limits. But the whole condition and problem of the family life and of child-bearing have been distorted and misunderstood, and it will be long before marriage and children assume their rightful place as sacraments, and longer still before the pain and suffering consequent upon our mistakes and on the misuse of the sexual relation have disappeared, and the beauty and consecration of marriage and of the manifestation of souls in form supersede the present wrong grouping of ideas. The disciple and aspirant upon the path, and the initiate upon his lighted way, have no better training ground therefore than the marriage relation, rightly used and rightly understood. The bringing of the animal nature under rhythmic discipline, the elevation of the emotional and the instinctual natures upon the altar of sacrifice, and the self-abnegation required in the life of the family are tremendous purificatory and developing potencies. The celibacy required is that of the higher nature to the demands of the lower, and the refusal of the spiritual man to be dominated by the personality and the demands of the flesh. The attitude of an imposed celibacy upon the equipment of many a disciple has led to much prostitution and to many perversions of God-given functions and faculties, and even where there has not been this distressing condition, and where the life has been sane, consecrated and sound, there have frequently been undue suffering and much mental distress and disciplining, before unruly thoughts and tendencies could be controlled. It is of course true that sometimes a man may be called to some particular life wherein he is faced with the problem of celibacy, and is forced to abstain from all physical relations and to live a strictly celibate life, in order to demonstrate to himself that he can control the animal and instinctual side of his nature. But this condition is frequently the result of excess and license in a previous life, which necessitates stringent measures and abnormal conditions in order to offset and rectify past errors and give the lower nature time to readjust itself. But again, it is no indication of spiritual development, rather the reverse. Forget not that here I am dealing with the special case of self-applied celibacy, and not with the present worldwide condition wherein, through economic and other reasons, men and women are forced to live without a natural and full life expression. The sex problem must, in the last analysis, be solved in the home and under normal conditions, and it is the advanced people of the world and the disciples of all degrees who must thus solve it.